My views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, I've got After Four, it's broadcaster and author Christian Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Also, before that, I'll be joined by former Brexit MEP Martin Daubney and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneier. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The port of Dover says passengers are still facing waits of up to 8 hours. That's as it tries to clear the backlog of Easter getaway traffic. It ran extra ferry services overnight after declaring a critical incident yesterday. Well, our national reporter Theo Chikomba is in Dover for us. Theo, what's the latest where you are?
It's the third day of delays here at the port of Dover. Many people using lorries, cars and more have been trying to get into the port to make their journey across the channel to Calais. Yesterday, the port have announced that around 300 coaches managed to get onto the ferries to travel, but today they've been standing still for hours. I spoke to a teacher earlier who's with around 80 students, teenagers looking to get to Italy for a skiing trip, but they've been here for hours on end without much communication of when they are going to be moving. Many of those students have been coming out of the coaches into the town to spend some time there, getting lunch and so on, because they've simply just been in coaches since then. The port have said they do apologise, that they're trying to rectify this situation which is affecting passengers here, particularly in processing, and of course on the other side, on the French side as well. It's not quite clear when they'll begin to move, but they have been here pretty much all day. We understand the coach right at the front has been around here for about 15 hours and it's still here, and many of those passengers will be hoping they can get on the ferry as soon as possible for their trips abroad.
Theo, thank you once again for that update. That's our national reporter Theo Chikomba there for us in Dover. The Home Secretary says political correctness is to blame for failures in dealing with grooming gangs. Suella Braverman is to introduce new measures tomorrow to tackle child sexual abuse. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, she says those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of sexual abuse. It follows an independent inquiry last year which described sexual abuse of children as an epidemic. Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Safeguarding, Sarah Dines, says this is a scourge on our society.
Can't stop in making sure that people are protected. Children are the most vulnerable part of our society, as well as the elderly. We must make sure that they're not sexually abused. So I don't accept we're going to be rife with false reports. There may be one or two, and they will be dealt with and identified. The overwhelming people that gave evidence are speaking the truth to the inquiry, and it was very heartbreaking testimony. We need to act.
A 55-year-old man has died after being hit by a van outside a pub in Cramlington. Northumbria Police says it's received reports 2 men had been struck by a van outside the Bay Horse pub last night. 1 man died at the scene. A second, also 55 years old, remains in hospital. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder and remain in custody. 3 British men are being held in Taliban custody in Afghanistan. They include holidaymaker Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago, a humanitarian network assisting charity medic Kevin Cornwell, and a second unnamed man says it believes they're in good health and are being treated well. The Foreign Office says it's working hard to make contact with them. Passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike from tomorrow as part of a bitter dispute over jobs, pay, pensions and conditions. More than 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union across 8 sites are set to walk out. They'll mount picket lines outside several offices, including Glasgow, Liverpool, London, Belfast and Newport in Wales. The PCS General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the dispute. Anthony Joshua has won his heavyweight fight against Jermaine Franklin. The British boxing champion put in a somewhat laboured display at the O2 Arena in London last night, securing a unanimous points victory in 12 rounds. It's Joshua's first time back in the ring since losing to Alexander Usyk last August, earning him his 25th professional win. After the fight, he said a battle of Britain with Tyson Fury is now the fight the boxing world needs.
What can I say? It's an honour to win, of course. That's what we train for. But let's say a fighter loses. He has to just rebuild and come again. I'm going to stop putting that amount of pressure on myself and just work hard and do my best. That's all I can do now.
And the Pope has led a Palm Sunday service in Rome a day after being sent home from hospital with bronchitis. Around 30,000 people came to watch Pope Francis opening Easter celebrations, which mark the start of Holy Week. The 86-year-old was driven to St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, sitting in the back of an open-topped car passing through the crowds. The Pope was taken to hospital on Wednesday, complaining of breathing difficulties, but he's now returned home to Vatican City. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up on today's show, following social media influencers Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan's release from prison from home arrest. What do you think? Is Andrew Tate the poster boy for toxic masculinity? The controversial influencer continues to proclaim his innocence, but is he a truly good role model for young men and boys? And then, of course, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has come under fire after saying that Rwanda is a safe country for refugees. This comes as after it was revealed that 12 asylum seekers living at a refugee camp in Rwanda were shot dead by police for protesting about living conditions. The Home Secretary also announced a new law that will soon make it mandatory for people who work with children to report child abuse or face prosecution under new laws to combat grooming gangs. And following the fallout from Keir Starmer, who failed to define what a woman is, has he now promised the support of Labour? What do you think? What do you think? Do you support them? That is despite Labour MPs being whipped to vote for the SNP's gender reform bill in Scotland earlier this year. So does Labour still have a women problem? We'll also be talking about landlords who are set to be rocked by further costs over the next few years, as they're going to be blocked from letting properties unless they upgrade to meet net zero energy efficiency targets within the next 5 years. Ministers say landlords will have to improve their energy performance of properties or face fines of up to £30,000. So is it time to stop this net zero nonsense? And then don't forget, stay tuned, my monologue will be on the way. We'll be talking about Labour and its woman problem. I want you to stay with me. That's at 4 o'clock. All that is on the way. Tell me what you think and everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, so we'll kick things off with Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Now, she's set to reveal a new law that will crack down on grooming gangs, where those who work with children will be forced to report child abuse or face prosecution. I actually thought there was a law that existed anyway, so it seems to me that they aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Now, this follows the recommendation made last year by the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. The Home Secretary has also insisted that Rwanda is a safe place, despite the incident in 2018 whereby 12 asylum seekers were shot dead by police in Rwanda, in a Rwandan refugee camp. So is it safe for our people to go, asylum seekers? Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel former MEP Martin Daubney, and also GB News presenter, and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Snyder. James, welcome.
Thank you.
And also Martin, welcome.
Pleasure.
So firstly, I want to talk about, really talk about Suella Braverman and her plans with regard. I mean, do you want to start with, should we start with actually the grooming gangs? Because I know that is a subject that you have spoken passionately about. What are your thoughts on the plans that she's making?
It's well overdue that she's speaking out on this, and it's massively overdue that politically it's being tackled. It's one of the greatest stains on recent British history, the total abandonment of ostensibly very vulnerable, underprivileged, white working-class girls from the north, from the Midlands, from unfashionable towns, which just happen mainly to have Labour councils in place. And the evidence is manifold that time after time the police turned a blind eye. They were afraid of being called racist because ostensibly, again, the data isn't racist. It was mainly British Pakistani men preying on white working class girls. Those are just the facts. The facts aren't racist. And it became a real hot potato, local councils, local police force, social services, and they decided to put their head in their sands, not only for the fear of being called racist, but I think to shore up their votes. Very dependent on the voting base of the ethnic minority communities, and this will be a stink. They just didn't want to kind of expose. As a consequence, thousands of girls had their lives destroyed forever by this. And I've spoken with some of these young women. I campaigned a lot across Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, where this was happening. And it was a total betrayal of those individuals. And this is long, long overdue. But like you, I'm amazed that you don't need a full background check on child abuse to work with children in the first place.
Well, I thought you had the DBS checks anyway. I thought there was something going on. James, what's your thoughts on this?
So you're right that there already is a statutory obligation to report things. And I think what was... there was a report last year, and I think what that recommended and what we imagine will come forward tomorrow is that that's toughened up a bit. So not you have an obligation to, but if you don't, then there's some criminal thing, which is a bit like in France they have the Good Samaritan's law. So if some crime happens near you and you don't do anything about it, that itself is a crime. Now, I'm not an expert, so I don't know if that's precisely the right thing, but it seems on the face of it, if that was recommended in a report, and that would help. But on the grooming gangs and the ethnic identity of perpetrators of horrific child sexual exploitation, their ethnicity should not matter in the slightest. Well, and hold on, please.
Go on.
And I don't think that it is a good thing that Suella Braverman, in bringing up what could be a very good and necessary reform, and I hope there's a wider range of packages, because I don't think just changing this law will do. There should be a whole range of other things done to prevent this terrible exploitation. But to suggest that this is primarily a problem of one particular community done against another particular community is not what the evidence is borne out.
So, what does the evidence say then? Because you said it's not what the evidence is borne out.
Yeah,
I thought it was, but you tell me why.
So there was in 2020, there was a Home Office study done to look into exactly this, which found that there is no correlation in the data between the perpetrators of child sexual exploitation and ethnicity. In other words, people of all ethnicities and all backgrounds are perpetrators of this.
No. I've given you plenty of time, so I'm going to say something. Yeah. No, I've listened, and now it's my turn. OK, so that isn't really the point, is it? The point of the matter is that this is a description of the kind of people who are perpetrating this specific crime. And this specific crime is being perpetrated mostly, in the main, by Pakistani, English Pakistani Muslims. That is a fact. It's not because that they're Pakistani Muslims that they're perpetrating it. It's just a fact of the case.
Yeah, and you are quite right to say in a majority white country, the majority of people who are committing sex offences are white. Same as in Nigeria, they'll be black. But the point of the matter is, turning a blind eye to it politically and on the ground in terms of the police force is specific to this incident.
Agreed. So no blind eye to such serious crime should ever happen.
And that's what this is about.
Of course, and there's a whole range of other things. For example, in that Casey report into the Met, it found that far too few police officers who deal with these cases have had specialist training. There's a whole range of things, but when the majority are white British who are who committed child sexual exploitation, because the majority of people in the country are. But they are. If what you're saying is the case, you would find a disproportionate overrepresentation of other groups. Actually, what you find out from the Home Office report in 2020 is that there isn't a specific statistical correlation.
James,
so there are areas where we agree.
James,
there are areas where we agree.
We've spoken for a long time. The point is, every single case of paedophilia and child exploitation should be pursued with the full force of the law. That's the point, and it isn't happening. That's what's happening. It's not about who does what. It's about the response when it happens.
We agree.
And the response when it happens has been mollycoddling and cotton wool and arm's length because of the fallout politically and in terms of damaging the vote base in areas such as Rotherham, Rochdale, Hartlepool. We can reel off all of these poor towns across Britain. The fact of the matter is, you are right in the data, but the data doesn't tell the whole story. It's about the disproportionate lack of political will to tackle it when it happens. This is long overdue.
Well, let's see what comes out tomorrow. Some things certainly are long overdue. For example, the police who are dealing with these cases should get specialist training. The backlog, the delay in dealing with the cases once it's reported to the police has been expanding a lot. There are a whole number of things. But my point is, if we focus purely you're saying focusing politically in one way, and I'm saying focusing politically in another way, can blind us to dealing with what is the right thing, which is what are the changes that could be made to law, to policing practices, to social services and so on, that are going to make these kinds of disgusting, heinous crimes less likely to happen.
Well, on this particular occasion, one of the things that could have been changed, because they were so worried about being told that they were racists, they actually withheld that information and hid things. And Suella actually says that she suggests that Pakistani communities also shielded the abusers, saying they had been a communal shutting down in some areas. So this was really something that was within a certain type of person, within a certain community, committing a certain type of crime to a certain type of person. And those things were relevant.
I think the way in which she is talking, especially about communities, is in such a way that could demonise whole communities. What we're talking, let's say a grooming, and grooming gangs are not all from one particular community, for example.
But we are talking. No. We are talking specifically about this case, though. We're talking about what this particular thing that Suella Braverman has highlighted, and the grooming gangs within the Pakistani community. So she's talking about that specifically.
OK, but why is she only talking about the ones that took place in that community? For example,
these are just.
But unfortunately, there's a whole host of these cases where there was long-standing child sexual abuse of vulnerable people, and that wasn't dealt with. And they aren't only at all from people from
I think we've all
from that
agreed.
community.
We've all agreed that this is not uniquely British Pakistan, and we agreed that about 10 minutes ago. The fact of the matter is that the response is disproportionate. It's disproportionately soft against certain communities. It just is. And one thing I want to get across is this is the consequence of this poisonous identity politics pyramid that the liberal left, whatever you want to call them, invented, which puts white working class girls at the bottom. They're invisible. They weren't helped. They were ignored. They were actually mocked by Labour politicians who said they were part of the problem. And we have a system where their lives, the racism against them, the ignoring of their problem is deemed unimportant because they've been placed on this hierarchy by people who think that the concerns of ethnic minorities matter more than theirs. That is the cancer at the heart of all of this.
No, I don't think that is right, because I don't think that it was this supposed hierarchy of identity politics that...
Well, there is.
That cut services for vulnerable people, as has been happening for the last 13 years, right? That wasn't done, which undoubtedly will have had a material impact on these things. Now,
well, listen,
when we look at...
We're going to have to move on with this. I just want to briefly ask you with regards to Swallow Beverman and Rwanda, and whether you think it's a safe country, because, you know, there was that incident, people haven't really highlighted it, where refugees were shot, 12 killed in Rwanda. Is your view that Rwanda is a safe country?
I don't think we should be sending people there, no.
Why?
Well, I mean, I don't think as a country we should be sending people away and outsourcing our problem, but also, in this case highlighted, you've got 12 people gunned down.
But where would
is that safe? No.
Where would you put people then? Like I hear you, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that terrible, aren't we awful? Well, they...
As we've discussed on this show now many times, I think that we should properly resource so that we can process the cases quickly, so that genuine asylum seekers, who are the majority of the people...
But where would they go then? Okay, so we found the majority of people, where would they go then?
OK, has there been some terrible problem when 150,000 Ukrainian refugees have come here? Have we suddenly run out of space?
There was a scheme that allowed people into their homes.
Right, no, but my point is, have we suddenly run out of space? Would we suddenly run out of space if we helped 20, 30, 40,000 more vulnerable people? Now, how many people do you think are going to be sent to Rwanda? The answer is precisely zero.
Are you asking me questions, or are you asking questions that you can answer yourself?
I answered it. Precisely zero.
Just asking questions
precisely
that you answer
zero.
Yourself. OK, well, let me answer the question, one of the questions that you asked. Well, we can't keep doing that, though, can we? There is a limit, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the best solution is not to let these people arrive in the first place. If they are arriving in false pretences, which we know is the example with, say, for example, the Albanians, and the vast majority are economic migrants. And they come from a safe country. Again, we've had this conversation many times. As far as Rwanda goes, it's no surprise that evidence will be dug up that to underline the fact it's unsafe and unsuitable, because the immigration industry is worth many, many millions of pounds. There are charities, NGOs, civil service. Now, this is a huge industry now. They don't want immigration to stop. They don't want asylum seekers to stop. They don't want the borders to stop being, to be shored up. They want this to continue because it's a huge business. We have to understand that. There's a huge vested interest which is against the will of the democratic vote of the nation, which has time and time again since 2014 voted for stricter border controls. Is undermined by all of these activists.
All right, well, that's the final word. You look like you want to say something. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
You've got about 20 seconds, though.
If you want to stop people being forcibly displaced, you have to deal with the underlying causes of conflict, of famine and of climate change. Those are the things that are driving...
just all of that, then. Well, if I could deal with all that, then that would be great. But that's a bit of a tall ask, and I just can't afford it. Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll be discussing whether Keir Starmer and the Labour Party has an issue with women. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 25 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has promised that his party will not roll back on women's rights if they win the next general election, as he assures that 99.9% of women haven't got a penis. So he couldn't say a woman doesn't have a penis. He went to 99.9% to give a slight margin of error for some people who want to say they're women when they're biologically not, or perhaps people who have... Anyway, I shouldn't go into it. But this is despite the previous embarrassment where Sir Keir Starmer failed to define a woman, and Labour MPs were whipped to vote for the SNP's Gender Recognition Reform Bill. So I'm going to start with... Who did I start with before? Is it Martin? I'm going to start with you. You're not really a fan of Keir Starmer.
I'm not his biggest fan, no. That's probably an understatement. But the idea that Labour has a women's problem is completely rubbish.
Why?
And the Labour Party's, if you look backwards to previous actions and then forwards to what they're proposing...
Which ones are you saying specifically?
Right.
Tell me some actions.
So the Labour Party brought in the Equal Pay Act.
When was that?
In the 1974 to 79
let's talk
government.
About current day Labour, because they've changed, they've evolved quite
OK, right. There's
talk about Keir Starmer's Labour.
There's the 2010 Equality Act. Labour has majority female MPs.
Have they ever had a female leader?
No, they haven't had a female leader.
No, interesting.
Let's
talk about Keir Starmer.
Yeah, OK, fine. Labour have policies on childcare, on closing the gender pay gap, and so on and so forth. So Labour does... do I think they could be doing much better, being more ambitious and more radical on those two things, on gender pay gap, on childcare? Yes, I do. But they are doing something, and they're doing more than the government. So,
okay,
can I
just ask you, because you said that you've given some examples which were back in the day, some of them where Keir Starmer wasn't leading the party, and I think it's specifically him that we're focusing on. What about Rosie Duffield and the issue there, where she said that women have a cervix, or she agreed to the notion that women have a cervix, and then she was scared to go to her own party conference because of that, because there was a whole sort of backlash against.
So that isn't a thing about women. That's a thing about Rosie Duffield. So there's a different point.
Well, no,
there.
it's because she said that women women have a service. And it was it was a party conference she was scared to go to.
Right, that's people shouldn't be scared to go to Labour Party conference, although, it's not that fun a place. But that's not women are scared to go to Labour Party conference. That's Rosie Duffield because of some views that she holds.
That women have a cervix.
Well, that's not the sole statement for why that people are critical of her.
Okay.
People are critical of her because of her frequent statements which are opposed to trans rights. That's why people that support trans rights...
Fair. Give me a statement that she has said that is a statement against trans.
That's why people are...
But give me a statement then. You've made...
I don't have a statement off the top of my head. But...
It comes back to the previous point, and that is, in their pursuit of identity politics, the Labour Party, the left, all of the left, have decided that the rights of certain people are more important than the rights of others. In this case, the rights of 0.1% of the population, biological men who decide that, biological women who decide they want to have a penis, are more important than 51% of the population, and that is women. And we saw this in Scotland when the Gender Recognition Bill came forward. It destroyed the SNP, it brought down Nicola Sturgeon, and until that point, Keir Starmer was in total support of that piece of legislation. Then he saw it was disastrous and he changed his mind. This is my problem with Keir Starmer. He's got more positions than the Kama Sutra. On Brexit, he headed up the People's Vote campaign for 3 years to reverse Brexit. Now he'll vote for the Windsor Framework without even reading it. Right, on gender, we've already decided. He's now deciding, actually, I'd better back 51% of the population because I might lose the election. On borders, if Cuba holds up a little refugees welcome sign, suddenly he wants to get tough on borders because he's done a load of focus groups in the Red Wall, and he's not a politician with conviction. He's a guy like one of those Chinese weather balloons. He goes wherever the wind blows it. He does.
He's a windsock.
He's pursuing votes, I think.
We all agree with that.
Cynically, and I think it shows the measure of the man. He's just going to keep changing his mind to say the right thing to avoid not offending a group of people today.
But what about some people might argue that he's actually right that 99.9% of women don't have a penis?
Well, he was almost right. It's 100%. Of women don't have a penis. Biology and reality are more important than what trans activists or what Keir Starmer thinks. And this is where the country is just losing its mind. Most people will be looking on just aghast that we're even having this conversation. People are bothered about their heating bills. They're bothered about our open borders. And these idiots are being consumed by fringe issues that most people just roll their eyes and think, can you please just get on with being adults and running the country?
I would say that isn't, for me, as a woman, that's not a fringe issue. So to me, that is a very important issue.
Of course it is.
Where someone might say, oh, well, I'm a woman, but they're a biological man. I accept some people are trans, that's fine. I've not got a problem with that. But the real reason why the sexes are separated are because of the difference in strength and certain attributes that men have, whether you've changed sex or not, biologically or whatever, whether you've changed sex or not, which you can't actually do biologically, but whether you've had the hormones or whatever, you still have the advantages of being a man. That's right.
And that was the overreach.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the overreach, I think, of the modern trans movement. In sports, you're dead right. There's a clear biological advantage to being born male, going through male puberty, having male hormones. And then in terms of law and order, placing biological men who have been rapists, like we saw in Scotland, into women's prisons, onto women's prison wards, into women's toilets, into women's changing rooms, into girls' spaces, is fundamentally wrong. And people get that. And politicians don't, because they're on a different planet.
Why do you think, James, that they're having an issue with this and they're having discussions about what a woman is? Why do you think that they're struggling with that?
I think that in order to distract from the fact that most people are less well off than they were in 2005, that bills are soaring, that the government has no clue how to deal with it. The only thing that seems to, what's going up along with bills and so on and so forth is the wealth of billionaires, and the government has no interest in doing any of these things, and nor does the majority of the media, which is owned by billionaires who benefit from exact the same thing. So this is why these culture war issues get pushed and get amplified and get pushed straight to the front of the agenda, because it can get people mad and it takes up airtime, which is exactly what we're doing here. Now, Keir Starmer, for all of his manifold faults, right? He did not suddenly decide to invent trans people. He didn't suddenly invent the laws that already exist. He didn't invent the question in the British census in 2020. Correct. So the idea, So the idea that this is an issue which Keir Starmer or Labour Party is pushing just isn't the case. The stuff that is these outrages which are being being drummed up come almost entirely from one side of the culture wars, and culture wars are designed to distract from the real struggle.
It's not fair, you know, to women, and we need more men. We need more men to start sticking up for women on this issue, actually. It's not fair to, like, say, 51% of the population are just being drawn into a culture war issue, and they're right-wing, they're fascist.
Women on average are more supportive of trans rights than men in polls.
Where did you get that?
In all of the polling. YouGov, Ipsos Murray, they've been asked. In the advert break, I'll find
You'll
it.
find me, and I'll find you the statistics. Just say something else.
It's just not fair to brush this to one side as Keir Starmer hasn't invented this. The problem is the adults in the room haven't called time on this nonsense and just spoken biological truth and facts and said, actually, this is important to a tiny minority of people. Let's push it to one side and actually tackle the real issues that matter in the country. That's what needs to be done.
Well, stay tuned, because coming up, I'll be doing my monologue at 4 o'clock on that very issue. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll be discussing whether it's time to stop the net zero madness before we all run out of money, and also whether social media influencer Andrew Tate is a positive role model for men and boys. You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, GB News contributor and former Brexit MEP Martin Daubeny, and also former Corbyn advisor James Schneider. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Port of Dover says passengers are still facing waits of up to 8 hours as it tries to clear the backlog of Easter getaway traffic. It ran extra ferry services overnight after declaring a critical incident yesterday. It said extra coach bookings had impacted operations, as well as lengthy French border processes and bad weather. Passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike from tomorrow as part of a bitter dispute over jobs, pay, pensions and conditions. More than 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union across 8 sites are set to walk out. The PCS General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the dispute. The Home Secretary says political correctness is to blame for failures in dealing with grooming gangs. Suella Braverman is to introduce new measures to tackle child sex abuse tomorrow. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, she says those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of sexual abuse. It follows an independent inquiry last year which described sexual abuse of children as an epidemic. A 55-year-old man has died after being hit by a van outside a pub in Cramlington. Northumbria Police says it received reports 2 men had been struck by a van outside the Bay Horse pub last night. 1 man died at the scene. A second, also 55 years old, remains in hospital. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder and remain in custody. And 3 British men are being held in Taliban custody in Afghanistan. They include holidaymaker Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. A humanitarian network assisting charity medic Kevin Cornwell and a second unnamed man says it believes they're in good health and are being treated well. The Foreign Office says it's working hard to make contact with both of them. TV, online, DAB Plus radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's coming up to 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. At 4, you'll hear what I had to say about Sir Keir Starmer trying to defend women after he failed to define what one was. You won't want to miss that.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 39 minutes past 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome back. If you've just joined me, stay with me. We're live all the way through till 6. Now, landlords across the country face being blocked from letting houses unless they meet the net zero energy efficiency targets within a 5-year period. Now, ministers are threatening to fine landlords up to £30,000 as government plans to force up to 2 million landlords to increase their energy certificate ratings to a minimum of C. So when will this net zero, I'm calling it net no-no, madness, when will it end? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by GB News host and Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubeny and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Martin, I'm going to start with you. Have you ever been a landlord?
No, I haven't. I'm not in the fortunate position to be able to do that. I wish I was, but I'm not. But as far as net zero goes, I think it's a class war. I think it's a war on the working classes. I think it's a luxury belief system by the privileged, by the elites, by the rule makers who are using it as the greatest taxation vehicle of our lifetimes. Let's all save the planet and make you poorer, make you colder, make you impoverished, and make you feel terrible about your existence. They treat humans as a blight upon the planet, which should be taxed and punished. And it's the notion that landlords will just cough this up without passing that fee down to their tenants, it's for the birds.
Well, I mean, the thing is, because the ratings are A to G, as I've been a landlord for many years, and the ratings are A to G, and the idea was an energy performance certificate, so it's called an EPC, and the idea was that you would get this EPC and you'd find out roughly how much your energy would cost you. So it'd give you an idea of the ratings, but of course, they're turning this round. So now, if you are a landlord, I think it's 2028 is the date, that within 5 years, if you haven't got your house to between A to C, then you can no longer let out your property. And it'll be things like heat pumps that you're going to need to put in there. James, what do you think about that?
So we need to have a massive national programme of insulating our homes and bringing them up to energy standards, because that is going to create good jobs, it's going to reduce emissions, and it's going to bring down our bills. And some people, quite a lot of people, like me, live in private rented homes. So we can't put in the infrastructure. So any incentives that could be provided for us, we can't put in. So that is why private landlords will have to be part of upgrading the energy efficiency of our homes, because even if there were, okay, you don't think climate change is real or you're sceptical about it.
No, don't talk.
But hold on. But even if...
Stop. No, you hold on. You just put words in my mouth, so I'm going to take those words out of my mouth from you and say, I do believe the climate is changing, but the effect that we have on it, I think, is questionable.
OK, so even if climate change weren't an issue, which it's the biggest existential issue of our time, but even if it weren't...
In your view.
Even if it weren't, in order to reduce bills, to put money back in people's pockets, insulating homes is an extremely good investment. So it's something that we should be immediately doing. The government should be doing a substantial part of it. Some of it could be offered to people in some subsidies or incentives to do it, and private landlords have to do it as well.
Well, where do you think they're going to get the money from? Because, as Martin said, it's going to come right to you.
Yeah, that's the problem in a nutshell. You know, it's all stick and no carrot. It's like if you don't get an electric car, you're going to get fined £12.50 every day to drive in London. That's City Khan's approach. And if you don't get your insulation done, you're going to get fined 30 grand. It's all threats and bluster. And the people who are disproportionately affected by this are those who are poorest, who are spending most of their money on heating, on driving, on petrol, on food, because all of those things have a knock-on effect on their rent. And that will have a knock-on effect. If a landlord's got to spend 30 grand on insulation, is he going to do it? Oh, no problem, my name's Santa Claus. No, he'll do it and he'll pass that cost on to the tenants, who often are those at the bottom end because they can't afford to get in the house.
Or he'll sell the house. So most landlords...
People like yourself, you'd be hit by this.
If they tell me that I'm going to have to pay 30 grand, I'll sell the property. I'll be like, I'm not doing that. And they've also taken away other incentives for landlords. So before, you could actually deduct the cost of your mortgage that you're paying against the tax, against the money that you receive for the property, or the interest on that. You could deduct it. But now there's no deduction. So whatever
that's a good thing.
Well, not really, not for the landlord, because... let me finish. It's not a good thing, because what happens is the landlord then increases the rent. Yeah, so how is that good for you?
I mean...
Well, no, go on, answer. You said it's a good thing. How is it?
Yes, it is a good thing. Explain. It is a good thing.
Why?
Because people who are at the very top, especially people who own wealth, need to pay more... Just hold on. Need to pay more tax, because for most people... Martin is right that the people that are most struggling is ordinary people, because pay is below where it was in 2005 and bills are much higher. And whereas billionaire wealth over the same period has gone up fourfold, 400%. Okay. Right? So there is money. People who have more money than they could possibly use, that needs to be taxed, and that should provide support. That should provide jobs, support, and investment that the overwhelming majority of people will benefit from. But that's only a small proportion
of people, and actually most landlords are accidental landlords. So most landlords only have one other property. It's over 80% of landlords only have one other property. So it's maybe they lived somewhere, then they met someone, they moved in with that person, they just kept the property because they could at the time. So these are just not necessarily really wealthy people. A very small proportion of landlords have loads of properties, and like you talked about billionaires, there are very few people that are billionaires. So the burden always falls on the largest proportion of the population, which is actually the middle classes, who don't really earn a fortune at all, and they ain't going to be able to afford it.
Yeah, and it just quashes the aspirations of a whole generation. I mean, that so many people now will be stuck in rented accommodation, perhaps for their entire lives, but becoming more like continental Europe. Home ownership was always something that was seen not only as a privilege, but as a real life goal. And how will that happen if young people can't afford to save a deposit, because now their rent's going up even more because their landlord has to pay for insulation?
Do you support rent controls?
And that will
Do you support rent controls?
No, I don't. I believe in the free market.
Oh, right, OK, great.
Do you support rent controls?
Of course I support rent controls, because the rent is too damn high. Of course I support rent controls.
Have you ever had a mortgage?
No, I rent, I
said.
said.
Let me just say, I had to ask the question to qualify it. So interest rates have suddenly gone up because of the inflation pressures, which they say, which I don't believe is the right thing to do, because it's a global thing, not a national thing, so this is not going to make much difference. It's going to make people poorer. But the upshot is that means the mortgage is more expensive. And a lot of landlords, I think it's about, on average, it's about £380 a month that is increased for the actual person who owns the house, so the landlord, and that will be passed over to the tenant. So what you're saying is that what you don't understand is all these costs will be passed to you as a tenant.
Well, rents have gone up way.
Because...
hold on.
Because of more
Rents have been going up for decades, right? Because housing as an asset class has been going up and it's decoupled from wages around the year 2000 because we have an economy where you will make more money if you have some money in buying an asset than doing anything with it.
Well,
than buying a productive asset.
That was true, but it's not,
right.
It's not
And that is why housing costs for renters as a proportion of their income has been going up dramatically. So yes, I support every single possible policy that brings down the cost that renters face.
So you're supporting mandatory insulations that we passed on to tenants by landlords. Well, and yet you expect your rent to magically go down or be frozen by the state.
Yes, I think I think rent should go down, and I think there is more than enough money to have a national programme of insulating every single home in this country. There are 27 million homes in this country. Every single one could be insulated.
No, it's not.
Of course they
that's not true. I know. I've spoken to heating engineers, and they say there are some properties that you're better off just knocking them down and starting again.
OK, fine. There's the odd example.
No, there's not an odd. The housing stock in this country, a lot of it's very old.
Most Victorian
and to insulate it will cost. It won't really happen. It won't work, and it probably use more carbon to do that than the carbon in the end that it will save. You're better off knocking a lot of it down. That's not going to happen. So I don't think that you're living in the world of reality. You're thinking that the landlord is going to pay for this upgrade. It's not going to affect your rent. You're thinking the landlord can pay for the extra interest rates. It's not going to affect your rent, and then you want the rents to come down. You're not living in the real world.
Landlords will increase rents with interest rates, which are what they're doing, but I think there should be a rent freeze. I don't think people should pay any more rent.
So you think they should pay a bit of money for you living in their house? I think... You know what they're going to do? They're going to sell the house.
I think that when over £50 billion a year is transferred from tenants who, generally speaking, don't have that much money, to landlords who, generally speaking, do have quite a lot more money, that is a problem, and that number should decrease. That number should decrease year on year.
It's hard to know where to start. I mean, that sounds like places like Cuba, where I've been, where everyone gets a free house, but you're on terrible money because there's not enough money around to provide free houses for everyone and give a decent wage.
I think James would like that.
Britain is completely out of kilter with other comparable countries in Western Europe how we...
Give me a comparable country.
Rent in Germany, rent in France, rent in the Netherlands.
Yeah, but they don't push home ownership, so that is the way they've done. You're comparing countries that don't have the similar ethos
and we've got no...
Our ethos is home ownership, and we've pushed that. Those countries are synonymous with places where people
social contract has been broken over the last 25 years because it has become unaffordable for most people under the age of 40 to ever think they're going to own a home.
That's true. I agree with that. Yes.
I agree with that. The answer isn't rent.
The answer is not the so-called free market.
But it's also not net zero. Net zero won't do it.
Build more houses. It's basic supply and demand. And the notion that we should all be renting and paying landlords in Europe, in Germany, the utopia you mentioned,
move on.
all the landlords are getting rich and the tenants are getting poorer.
Well, listen, thank you for that. Listen, what are your thoughts, Craig? We haven't had a chance to ask for your thoughts. GBViews@gbnews.uk. Send them through. Well, moving on to the controversial social media influencer and self-proclaimed king of toxic masculinity, Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan. They were released from prison after 4 months inside. They're currently under house arrest, and that is what Andrew had to say. Have a listen.
Freedom at last. Mashallah, brother, mashallah, mashallah. It's a little bit emotional. I've been in one room since last year, so it's a little bit emotional. I want to give respect, firstly, to the judges who heard us today, because they were very attentive and they listened to us and they let us free, so I have to give absolute respect to them. I have no resentment in my heart for the country of Romania or for anybody else. I just believe in the truth.
It was political, so...
I believe in God, and I think that the fire of truth will eventually destroy all lies, and anybody who lies in a long enough time frame will feel the sting of regret, and I believe in this.
Yeah, sure.
I truly believe that justice will be served in the end. There is 0% chance of me being found guilty of something I have not done. I maintain my absolute innocence, and I think most people understand this, and I look forward to being home. So thank you very much, everybody.
So is Andrew Tate the poster boy for toxic masculinity? I'll start with you, James. What do you think? Andrew Tate, is he fan or foe?
Foe, but or not friend, whatever the right way of putting it. I mean, he is the poster boy for toxic masculinity in that he doesn't think women are equal to him, and he's very popular. So, if that's the question, yes. At the top, you were asking, is he a good role model for young men? And I think the answer has got to be no. I don't know what he is overcompensating for, but the type of lifestyle that
I wonder.
Right, but the type of lifestyle that he is presenting is embarrassing and shallow, and is not the sort of thing that that is a good role model for young boys. But I don't think just saying, well, let's ban him or anything like that is going to work at all, because you have to look at why is it that the things that he's saying are appealing to a minority of young boys, and that can't just be dealt with by just shutting the guy up. We've got to deal with other things.
Well, you were an editor of a lads mag, weren't
Yeah,
you?
I was. I edited Loaded for almost 10 years. I was an ambassador for International Men's Day. I know a lot about how young men think. I did a load of work on the men going their own way, men who were giving up on sexual relationships. The incel movement demonised young men. Oftentimes, they're rejected in life because there's no easier way of getting rejected than being a modern young man, because you're a swipe left or you're a swipe right. And we have a small proportion of women going after a huge pool of women going after a tiny percentage of wealthy, tall, handsome men, and the rest are kind of losers in the eyes of the internet, in the eyes of the media. The media has demonised young men for ages now as toxic, as predatory, as problems waiting to happen, pornography, all of it is turning them poisonous. And then in strolls a false prophet like Andrew Tate, who's basically turned young men into a Ponzi scheme. He charges them $50 a month. He claims to have 200,000 subscribers. I doubt that. If he has, he's making £10 million a month from vulnerable, ostracised, socially awkward young men. That's my problem with him, not anything he says. Not the fact he looks like Saddam Hussein coming out of his bunker, painting himself as some sort of martyr. He's not a martyr, he's a predator. He preys on vulnerable young men and he monetises their loneliness. That's my problem with him.
But some people, I mean, I even hear women sort of almost supporting him, saying that what he's saying is great and that they want a man who's kind of man's man. I mean, there seems to be an appeal to him. Obviously, you've talked about him preying on vulnerable men, but has he got a point in part of his message? Is there anything in there that you think is valid?
I mean, I think you can find some, there will be some examples of some people that will like almost anything. There's a rich diversity in human existence. But I think it stands for a kind of distorted idea of what we used to think was standard and good masculinity. And so I can understand why some people think that they want to reach for that because the world is uncertain, things are changing and their lives are insecure. But it is a distorted image of something that itself needed to reform and grow and change as society reforms and grows and changes.
I agree with that. And a former mentor of this demographic, of course, was Jordan Peterson, who stepped in a few years ago. And he was the brains, if you like. This guy's the brawn. He's the bravado. And he offers this kind of hyper-masculine, almost pornographied version of fast cars, cigars, jewellery, watches, all the girls, the harem. It's a facile, shallow version of what's meant to be aspirational, which most men cannot achieve. And so he rips them off and charges them to try and get his lifestyle. He knows that they can't, most of them, ever achieve that. He doesn't care. He just wants to empty their pockets. That's what I hate about him. I don't really care about anything he says, his message. As a messenger, I just think he's a brazen opportunist. And what we should be doing is having more positive role models, fathers, mentors. I work for a charity called Lads Need Dads in Essex, and they find vulnerable young lads and they mentor and buddy and partner them up with builders or decorators or guitarists or poets or fishermen, and they rebuild their confidence, and beautiful young men come out of that because you intervene in a positive way, not selling them the illusion of sexual prowess, of being a millionaire, of having a Lamborghini.
He needs to go, Andrew Tate. I'm sick of him. But we've had quite a lot of messages in, so I want to read some of the messages that we've had throughout the show. Donna, on the question about landlords, says, I have a 2-bedroom flat that I rent in Bristol. My mortgage has gone up over £300 per month recently, and I've had to absorb this. I'm not rolling in Monday. I'm not rolling in money, she means. It's a lazy argument to assume all landlords are wealthy, which is something that I think you kind of posed. Let's see here. Somebody's told me to stop interrupting and sneering at issues at certain times. Usually when she disagrees, it's not her opinion, it's the guests far cleverer and more interested than her. We don't need her opinion shoved down our throats. She starts shouting and laughing, deafening, very unnecessary, unattractive and bullying. Thank you for that, Alison.
It's your show now.
Well, it is my show, Alison. I'm sorry about that. I know what you mean, though. I can be a little bit annoying, yes. Let's see. On net zero, Tony says, not only will this reduce the availability of rented homes and drive up rents, plus the deal with Serco to house migrants that not only pays 10% above what housing benefit pays, Serco, using taxpayers' money, also pay council tax, utility bills, blah, 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 blah. Yes, I hear what you're saying. And I don't know whether that's all true, but anyway. And Avril, final one to you, Avril, on housing. What has she said? People who fall on hard times lose their homes, and I don't have time to read it, Avril. I was getting all excited. Avril, listen, it's a great one. She's talking basically that it's going to help their mortgages. I believe that 6 months... I can't read it all, Avril. It's really good, but thank you for that. I will read it later. Right, well, listen, I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, Martin Daubney and former advisor Jeremy Corbyn. You're back, aren't you? When?
Yeah, early birds, I'm back. I'm doing breakfast this week, Monday to Thursday, then next Saturday, 12 to 3 on GB Saturday.
And thank you so much to James Knight as well, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. And thank you to you. Listen, I'll be back in a little moment's time and we'll be doing my monologue. Yes, it is, of course, on that wonderful Sir Keir Starmer.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It has just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has rejected suggestions Brexit could be the cause of delays at the port of Dover. Holidaymakers trying to get away for Easter are still facing delays of up to 8 hours, despite extra services running overnight, although authorities say it's now half that long, 4-hour delays. Officials have blamed lengthy immigration processes on the French side. Our national reporter, Theo Chikomba's in Dover. Theo, from what you can tell, how bad are the backlogs? OK, we don't have Theo, so we will move on. Miss Braverman, meanwhile, has been explaining new measures she will implement tomorrow to tackle child sexual abuse. The Home Secretary says political correctness is to blame for failures in dealing with grooming gangs. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, she says those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of sexual abuse. It follows an independent inquiry last year which described sexual abuse of children as an epidemic. Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Safeguarding, Sarah Dines, says this is a scourge of our society.
Can't stop in making sure that people are protected. Children are the most vulnerable part of our society, as well as the elderly. We must make sure that they're not sexually abused. So I don't accept we're going to be rife with false reports. There may be one or two, and they will be dealt with and identified. The overwhelming people that gave evidence are speaking the truth to the inquiry, and it was very heartbreaking testimony. We need to act.
A 55-year-old man has died after being hit by a van outside a pub in Cramlington. Northumbria police say it received reports 2 men have been struck by the van outside the Bay Horse pub last night. A man died at the scene. A second, also 55 years old, remains in hospital. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder and they remain in custody. 3 British men are being held in Taliban custody in Afghanistan. They include holidaymaker Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. A humanitarian network assisting charity medic Kevin Cornwell and a second unnamed man says it believes they are in good health and are being treated well. The Foreign Office says it's working hard to make contact with them. Passport Office workers are launching a 5-week strike from tomorrow as part of a bitter dispute over jobs, pay, pensions and conditions. More than 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union across 8 sites are set to walk out. They'll mount picket lines outside several offices, including Glasgow, Liverpool, London, Belfast and Newport in Wales. The PCS General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. Well, Anthony Joshua won his heavyweight fight against Jermaine Franklin late last night. The British boxing champion put in a somewhat laboured display at the O2 Arena in London. He secured a unanimous points victory after the fight went the distance. Now, it's Joshua's first time back in the ring since 2 defeats, both to Alexander Usyk, the last of those in August, and he got his 25th professional win last night. After the fight, he said a battle of Britain with Tyson Fury is now the fight the boxing world needs.
What can I say? It's an honour to win, of course. That's what we train for, but let's say a fighter loses. He has to just rebuild and come again. I'm going to stop putting that amount of pressure on myself and just work hard and do my best. That's all I can do.
And the Pope's led a Palm Sunday service in Rome a day after being released from hospital with bronchitis. Around 30,000 people arrived to watch Pope Francis opening the Easter celebrations, which mark the start of Holy Week. The 86-year-old was driven to St. Peter's Square in the Vatican, sitting in the back of an open-topped car passing through crowds. The Pope was taken to hospital on Wednesday. He was complaining of breathing difficulties, but returned home to the Vatican after making a swift recovery yesterday. This is GB News, more as always as it happens, but now let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Why can't he say it? A woman does not have a penis. See, it's easy, because that's how biology works. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is tying himself in knots over something that is basic biology.
I just remind the House that the Right Honourable Gentleman struggled to define what a woman was. When he couldn't make up his mind on that point.
So a woman can have a penis?
Nick, I'm not. I don't think we can conduct this debate with, you know.
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No. It's just. I just.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said.
I mean, in his latest comments on what a woman is, Sir Keir Starmer says 99.9% of women don't have a penis. Oh, God. Look, in the womb, when a woman is having a scan, at around about 16 weeks, you can find out whether you're having a boy or a girl. Now, how do they tell? By looking at the sex organs. If the unborn child has a vagina, then it's a girl. A penis, then it's a boy. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's the extremely rare occasion where something goes wrong. The sex organs may be ambiguous, but this is when something goes wrong. And something could always go wrong, so nothing in life is 100%. So the 0.01%, which Sir Keir Starmer seems to be leaving room for, is so that he can also include trans women, so biological men. I mean, is he simply, in my view, once again hedging his bets and using this to get out of saying that a woman does not have a penis, which I think is a bit slippery, really. Yet when it came to Nicola Sturgeon's gender recognition reform bill, which would allow children as young as 16 to self-ID without any medical intervention, Labour MPs were whipped to vote in favour of it. They were, however, allowed to have a free vote on whether it should be blocked by the UK Parliament. But why would he ensure that his MPs voted for it in the first place? I mean, I'm actually grateful, and I don't mean this in a weird way, but for double rapist Isla Bryson showing how legislation like this compromises women's safety. I mean, can you imagine if that hadn't happened? Well, I'm not prepared to pander to a minority by making the language uncertain. Otherwise, where are we with that? It marginalises women. Keir talks about his children, saying that he wants to know what they're learning about transgender issues in school. But in my view, school is not the place to be teaching this, especially primary schools where children are extremely impressionable and these sort of issues are not even on their radar. And it can be taught in various ways which are not standardised. For example, some schools using resources like gender unicorn diagrams, which show sliding scales, male, female and other identities. I mean, who agreed to all of that? The other day, I was speaking to my teenage daughter and she told me that she was scared with all the different genders that are cropping up. She told me that there were over 100 and she thought it was madness. The Labour Party continue to swerve this issue because it exposes the divide within their ranks and the infighting amongst their MPs. Keir obviously saw what happened to Nicola and he was worried, as he should be. Keir called for national guidance on the gender issue and said that they should try to make it cross-party because it's not helpful for parents or schools to have just as toxic divide, and what's needed is practical common sense advice. Well, yes, that's very sensible. Only the divide seems to be within his own party and not the Conservatives. So maybe he could sort out his own party instead. He said the lesson from Scotland is that if you can't take the public with you on a journey of reform, then you're probably not on the right journey. Well, let me narrow it down for you, Sir Keir. If you lose over 50% of the vote, which is women, you lose the election. Right, so before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are you fed up with the NHS? According to reports, over 12,000 children are facing dangerous waits to get NHS help due to the COVID backlog, and that is as junior doctors are gearing up to strike over working conditions and pay, which could leave patients waiting even longer for critical operations. So is it time to overhaul the whole system? Maybe we need to fix the NHS, but can it actually be fixed? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. I'll be joined by political commentator Danny Armstrong, the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, to discuss the top stories from around the globe. And on the menu, former US President Donald Trump is expected in court on Tuesday over making hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. That was back in 2016. Of course, he denies most of these allegations. And then at 5, it's this week's Outside. And my celebrity, who is a mystery, has had a very interesting career. She started out as a fashion designer and has now become a regular fixture on TV, appearing on This Morning and My Shirley Valentine. Any thoughts on who she might be? Well, that's coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel Christine Hamilton. She's a broadcaster and author, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, I'm going to start with you, Christine. Sir Keir Starmer 99.9% of women don't have a penis.
I wonder how he came up with that statistic. In my wildest dreams, I imagined that he'd lined up a shadow cabinet, stopped naked, and had a look at them, and that's how he came to his conclusion. But, I mean, how do you come up with 99.9? I mean, women don't have a penis, and that's that. I think Starmer, you're quite right, he is really worried about his splitting his party. The election is his to lose now. He is riding high, he realises that, and so he's realising that he has got to wind back. As you said, over 50% of voters are women, and the women's vote is incredibly important. So he's realised that he's got to get his ducks in a row on this one. And he's been... I mean, those clips you showed of him from a few weeks ago, completely unable to answer a question that a 6-year-old... well, perhaps not 6, but a 10-year-old...
By 6-year-old, probably.
By 6-year-old, probably, can answer. And yet the leader of the Labour Party, for ideological reasons, is unable to answer it. I mean, they need to be replayed and replayed during the election. But I think he's realised that he's got to get his act together.
Well, he's also contradicted himself, because he accepts that north of the border, the downfall of Nicola Sturgeon was this complete mess about trans rights. Yeah, he is on that side of this complete mess of trans rights. So what he does, he acknowledges the fact that she's being booted out, metaphorically, because of this mess. Yeah, he still is on that side of the fence. Kelly Jane Minshall or Posey Parker, the feminist who, along with J.K. Rowling, yeah, she's just come back from New Zealand and she's a big feminist and she doesn't want blokes with penises in long dresses in her changing room. She's on the other side of the fence. She's actually, I heard this on GB News, she's actually standing in Keir Starmer's constituency.
Yes, I heard that.
So she is going to be having big debates. She is going to be standing on a platform and hopefully will be grilling Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer just needs to understand that 99.9% of the public think that he's wrong on this. Yeah. So 99.9% of women don't have penises. He needs to understand that 99.9% of people think he's an idiot with this.
Yeah. Because the thing is, you can't ever say that 100% of anything. I mean, they're literally, nothing is 100% anything, nothing is... So that is one of those phrases that people use to say pretty much everybody, it's across the board, but he's not brave enough to say what I'm prepared to say, what you're prepared to say, and what most of the public will think.
The other sort of side issue to all this, something I read in the paper this morning, I think it's the Lyric Theatre, but it's one of the main London theatres. A journalist was going to the loo, and it's a multi-gender loo. There were apparently 6 urinals. And one cubicle at the far end. She had to walk past 6 urinals, potentially with 6 men doing their business, to get to the one cubicle at the end. If there was somebody in that cubicle, she would have to have stand and waited. Who dreamt that up on all this?
I can tell you who dreamt it up. Idiots who say it's inclusive, and they hide behind this a perception of an impenetrable shield of diversity. And if you can say that you're sticking up for a minority, you can get away with murder.
Everything.
And obviously, look, what I get quite annoyed about is that to say these things, you're then called a transphobe and you're being transphobic. Look, I've got no interest in what somebody does in their spare time or what they are in that respect. But when it affects me, then I have an interest, and only then. That's
and when it affects
me, when it affects me as a woman, that's it. That's all I care about.
My only criticism of that is that as a bloke looking from the outside in, I don't know how it feels for a woman to be in a shared toilet with blokes coming in and out. But I would say, and I've said this to you before, I don't think we've agreed on it, is that people say that they feel unsafe. I would say that the word should be uncomfortable, because then the counter-argument is...
We have said uncomfortable. We have said uncomfortable.
But people say unsafe.
No. The word has always been uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable. But the reason why the sexes are divided is because of the strength advantage and so on, the physical advantages of men and things like that. So the reason why there is ever a divide, or the extra strength that a man might have in terms of sport or anything, that's the only reason why those things are divided.
No, I think when people came up with public toilets hundreds of years ago, it wasn't because of unsafety.
No.
It was because that...
What are you talking about?
Well, you just said it's because that was why it was designed.
The sexes are divided is only when there may be some advantage in terms of, say, strength or a physical advantage.
I'm talking about toilets.
No, I'm talking about male and female.
Well, I wasn't. I was talking about toilets.
That's what I'm talking about. That's why I'm correcting you.
No, but on the subject of loos, you're right. It isn't just...
Thank you, Christine.
Well, hang on. Quality.
Yeah, give her a chance.
Half right. we have multi-sex loos here at GB News, don't we? Not because it's a policy of GB News, but because the building is rented and that's what we have. None of us, I don't think, are very comfortable with that.
No.
I don't particularly.
Do you feel safe there?
This is what I'm coming to. I feel perfectly safe. It's nothing to do with
that's
safety,
because
but
it's at GB
I don't
News.
feel comfortable, and I don't think the men who have to use these multi-sex loos feel comfortable either.
But that is because it's at GB News as well. It's my place of work, and I feel very
so
comfortable here. But do you place that somewhere else? Well, I don't really know. It could be you put that somewhere else.
Public loo in a town
a public loo in a town, and then that's a whole different question. Do I feel safe? Would probably be a no. And the reason why these things tend to be divided is usually on that issue. Obviously not here and in a safe place, but on that issue is why these things are divided.
But that's their most powerful argument against what I think is a common sense, and which we can all agree on, is the fact that people will say, can you tell me or can you give me any evidence where somebody has actually committed a crime?
Oh, there's plenty.
A bloke?
There's plenty.
OK, well, they will say it.
There's plenty.
We're back to the point ones of Keir Starmer.
Nobody's saying that. Why bring in a policy that makes everybody feel uncomfortable? Never mind safety.
Well, I don't think everybody does feel uncomfortable. I think lots of women will feel uncomfortable, but not everybody.
Listen, that's just one policy, though. That's just one thing, and that's just almost trivial if you're in a place like this and whatever. Yeah. But we're talking on the wider scale.
I understand.
I mean, it infiltrates all of the system as well. So it's not just the toilets. That's just a small part of it, but there are other elements.
But also, ladies, that theatre, I saw the photograph, and you've got 5 urinals, and you've got to walk past the men, so they will have their back to you. Yeah. But they don't have any sort of privacy divisions. And that's something that is so antiquated. I hate going to the toilet. You're standing next to another fella, and honestly, you've just got to keep your eyes locked ahead. In America, and in lots of places now, they've got, like, sort of partitions. But as a woman, you'd have to walk past literally 6 penises on display.
Well, possibly.
There's not quite
to get to the cubicle at the end.
But that's just
maybe part of the appeal for some.
That's a small element of the issue anyway. You know, it should be that somebody could be able to define what a woman is. I don't think it should be such a big issue. But you're with me. If you've just joined me, it's just coming up to 19 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are you fed up of the NHS? Now, thousands of children are facing dangerous waits to get help from NHS community services due to the COVID backlog, and that is as striking. Junior doctors could face significant distress and delays to patient care. So it's time to overhaul the NHS. Are you fed up with it? Then at 5, I'll be joined by my celebrity mystery guest. She's a TV personality, a regular fixture on our screens. She's a blonde bombshell and has also written a book entitled The Rabbit Whisperer. And she was part of a very powerful TV couple before their shocking split. Which send me your thoughts, email gbviews@gbnews.uk or email me at gbviews. And I've got a poll up right now asking, are you fed up with the NHS? Cast your vote now, back in a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, we were discussing Sir Keir Starmer. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Stephen says the fight for women to have equal rights is over. Men who say they're women are taking over womanhood. And Judith says, Nana, you rock, that's all. Oh, thanks, Judith. Thank you very much. Oscar says, we all know what a woman is. Why doesn't Labour? Well, that's the question, isn't it? And if you can't give us some straight answers, I'd be concerned about other policies that I'm not getting straight answers for. But now it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are you fed up with the NHS? According to reports, more than 12,000 children are having to wait over a year to receive NHS help due to the backlog brought on by the pandemic. This all comes as junior doctors are preparing to take strike action against working conditions and wages, which could threaten the safety of patients, delay treatments of those who are critically ill and cause distress among other staff. Meanwhile, British Social Attitudes Survey has suggested that large majorities of people are dissatisfied with the NHS, with only 29% saying that they're happy with the service. And the NHS is currently at breaking point. So how can the government fix this, if ever? Can it be fixed? Is the problem worsening? Are you absolutely fed up with them? So for the Great British Debate, that's what I'm asking. What do you think? I'm joined now by political commentator Anna McGovern, a psychiatric nurse Julia Taylor, and neurologist and medical cannabis expert Dr. Mike Barnes. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Julia, because you're a psychiatric nurse, you work within the NHS. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, I'm fed up with the NHS and I work in the NHS. I'm working, luckily for me, I work in a good team. We've got enough people, but we've still got a backlog. It's, you know, but as for the pandemic caused the backlog for the poor children that are having to wait for treatment, I don't actually agree with that. And it was already backlogged anyway before the pandemic hit, because we've had cutback after cutback after cutback. Beds have been closed. We've lost loads of beds. We've got 10,000 people waiting to be put out into the community. And the problem, I don't think the main problem is with the NHS. I think it's with social care, because people are stuck in hospital and that's what's causing a lot of the backlog. And I don't think people realise that.
Do you think it can be fixed, though? Because a lot of people are looking at this thinking, oh, goodness, it's not even fixable. Julie, do you think it's fixable?
It would take some fixing, Nana. Yeah, firstly, we've got to get more people wanting to work for the NHS, and that pittance of a pay rise they offered, I'm going to say no to that. The 5% with the great big lump sum. That any nurse that accepts that is just greedy, because then it's just for them. For me, it's not just about them and me, it's about everybody. We need more people in the NHS, and there's no incentive because the pay is dreadful now compared to what it used to be.
Well, Julie, I want to bring Anna into this. Anna, what do you think? Are you fed up with it?
Yes, absolutely, and I think many people are. And I think it's a direct cause of lockdown as well. We're seeing huge backlogs. There's patients who are in need of urgent care. I personally remember when, over the Christmas, I was very ill and I needed to get a GP appointment. And when I approached my GP, without even asking how old I was, without asking, you know, have you got any health conditions, they immediately say to me on the phone, oh, you're taking an appointment away from someone who's an emergency. So imagine if an older person who has got health conditions called up and then were met by someone on the other end of the phone who said, well, actually, you're not a priority and there's other people who are in urgent need and you're not one of them. So for some people just to say that without any context, I think is horrible. And I think there's many people who are actually too afraid to actually approach the NHS because they don't feel like they will get an appointment. And this will literally kill people.
Well, it is killing people.
Yeah,
Dr. Mike Barnes, you're a medicinal cannabis expert and neurologist. What do you think? Are you fed up with it?
It's a really serious situation. I mean, in the last recorded quarter last year, we lost more NHS staff than any other previous recorded since records began. I mean, that's awful. We've got less doctors per head of population than any country in Europe. We've got the second lowest beds per head of population in country in Europe. So the situation is pretty dire. Can we fix it? Yes, of course, with goodwill from the government, we can fix the situation. It will take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and sadly, in the government terms, a lot of money.
But well, look, I'm thinking that I don't think it's fixable. I think it's a lot of money, more money. They're wasting money. They're wasting money. You put money in, it's going down a black hole, and they want more money. What for? They're wasting it. I mean, look, Anna, they're wasting money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're completely hemorrhaging money away, and they've got priorities such as, you know, get more rainbow roads, I think, and, you know, or ideological kind of push forwards, rather than actually putting that money towards urgent care, towards patients who actually need to see a GP to get an appointment. And I think that their priorities are completely wrong. And I think that's a huge contributing factor, because there's such a vast backlog now that there are people who urgently need that medical care and will not be able to access it. And I think this is a direct cause, again, as I said, because of lockdowns and because the government shut this country down. I think there is part of it.
They were in a mess. They were in a mess. They've been in a mess.
I absolutely agree. They've always been in a mess.
Yes, the lockdown exacerbated it, but they've been a mess. Julia, surely you would agree that they've been in a mess well before lockdowns.
Oh, absolutely. We're in a mess. A good 5 years before that. Like I say, 2010 came and literally it was just awful. Everything changed and it felt like we weren't getting enough food for the patients. Everything changed. Everything got taken right down to the bone. Beds got stopped. Wards got closed. Wards got amalgamated and far away from where people live. It really was diabolical prior to the pandemic.
But Dr. Mike
had no preparations.
Dr. Mike seems to think it's fixable, though. I mean, I would like to see a complete overhaul. I would like to see it. I would like to see parts of it. I'd like to see people contributing. I'd like to see layers of it, as in, because we already pay for it anyway. But I'd like to see layers. I'd like to see something where if you pay more, you can get more, but everyone is covered. I mean, what do you think, Mike? You said it's fixable, but Mike, can you see that working, or you're seeing in its current state?
Yes, I can see that working. I think one thing I would say is the government should stop fiddling with it. Every health secretary for many decades now has felt they could come in and fix the problem. And what all that's done is cause a complete rehash of the NHS, another management reshuffle, another change, and more money wasted on the hierarchy. You know, at the ward level, at a hospital level, those staff, those frontline staff, know how to make their ward function better, their hospital function better. I thought what we need to do, and I'm not against management, they struggle to do a good job in difficult circumstances, but there's too many. Put the power back as it used to be 10 or 15 years ago with those in the front line who know how it is that they can make things work better.
And I was just going to say, I think that there needs to be a systematic restructure of the NHS, because the current system that we have is completely broken. It's not serving the needs of the patients. And I almost think there needs to be a complete overhaul for it to actually be fixable again.
Julia?
Definitely, I totally agree with what they've both said. It is fixable, but it will take time. And really, we haven't got that time. We need to get moving now. Right now, and start fixing it and changing. A lot of it's private finance initiatives started to break it, Then loads of things are privatised in the NHS. You go for an MRI scan. That's not owned by the NHS. That's owned by a private company. That's what's broken it. That's the problem.
Do you think it's time we got rid of the notion that it's free at the point of need and acknowledge that that, in my view, seems impossible, Julia? Do you think we should need to get rid of that notion?
No, because look, that's exactly what we did with social care in the 1990s. We put it out to the privatised companies, and look at the state of that now. My own father died in January, and we wanted him home, but we couldn't get him home because there wasn't carers to come and look after him for about 3 weeks, and he died in a care home. That's the kind of thing that's happening.
I'm sorry to hear that. And Dr. Mike, you've got about 20 seconds. What's your final thoughts on it?
Well, other than focusing on money, there are other things we could do, which is spending a lot more money on health prevention, or health, public health, like obesity, like alcohol, like sexual health. And that's a really important thing. 40% of deaths in this country are preventable. Let's invest more money rather than reduce money, which the government has done, on public health measures. That's one thing.
And 20 seconds to you, Anna, finally.
I absolutely agree. I think that some of the sections of the NHS might actually benefit from privatisation, which I don't think the other panellists might agree with, but I think that might actually help fix the backlog and make the service work faster.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. Political commentator Anna McGovern, psychiatric nurse Julia Taylor, neurologist and medicinal cannabis expert Dr. Mike Barnes. Thank you so much. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, can we fix the NHS? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hi there, it's just after 4:30. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Port of Dover says passengers are still facing waits of between 6 and 8 hours, despite extra ferry services running overnight. It is still struggling to clear the backlog of Easter getaway traffic. Port officials are blaming slower border processing, although the Home Secretary maintains that's got nothing to do with Brexit. Passport office workers begin their 5-week strike tomorrow as part of a bitter dispute over jobs, pay, pensions and conditions. More than 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union across 8 sites will walk out. The PCS has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary says political correctness is to blame for failures in dealing with grooming gangs, accusing authorities of turning a blind eye to signs of abuse over fears of being labelled racist or bigoted. Suella Braverman is to introduce new measures to tackle child sexual abuse tomorrow. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, she says those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of abuse. It follows an independent inquiry last year which described sexual abuse of children as an epidemic. The government says it's in negotiations regarding the 3 British men being held by the Taliban in Afghanistan. They include the so-called danger tourist, Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. It's unclear how long he's been held for. A humanitarian network assisting the other 2 men, that's the charity medic Kevin Cornwall and a second unnamed man, were both detained in January. Well, the group says it believes they're in good health and they are being treated well. TV online, DAB plus radio and tune in. This is GB News. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. We'll stay with us here on GB News. There's loads more still to come, including my mystery guest in Outside. Now, I'll give you some more clues. She's passionate about driving and is the owner of an extremely rare Bentley. My celebrity guest is a keen traveller and enjoys trips to remote places in challenging conditions. So who is she? Who do you think? She'll be here just after 5 o'clock. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are you fed up with the NHS? Back after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
So welcome, if you've just joined me, where have you been? This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are you fed up of the NHS? According to reports, more than 12,000 children are having to wait over a year to receive NHS help. Of course, that is due to the backlog brought on by COVID. This all comes as junior doctors are preparing to take strike action against working conditions and wages, which could threaten the safety of patients, delay treatments for those who are critically ill, and also cause distress among other staff. In the meantime, a British social attitudes survey has suggested that a majority of people are dissatisfied with the NHS, around about 29% saying they're unhappy with the service. And the NHS, as you know, if you're ever waiting for anything, is currently at breaking point. I know my mother's waiting for a knee replacement, and that's been going on for ages. But how can the government fix this worsening problem? And is it actually fixable? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are you fed up with the NHS? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Danny, I'm going to come to you because you may well need the NHS after what's just happened to him. Danny, tell us what's happened to you.
What's happened to me?
Yeah, what's happened to your knee?
I was ushered through a security gate upstairs. Unbeknown to me, the security gate had closed.
It's got these glass things.
And it's a glass thing. And the guy, in my view, should have said, hang on, one at a time. So he allowed two of us to go through, and as soon as I went through, the second gate closed. And that would survive a nuclear bomb attack. Yeah. Those gates, you cannot move them. I'm over 20 stone, and I was sort of bounced back, and I've damaged my knee. Are you fed up with the NHS? The last time I used the NHS...
He doesn't want to say anymore because he's been whinging about it all.
The last time... I just think he should have said one at a time.
Yeah, OK.
The last time I used the NHS, I was most impressed because I am clumsy and I broke 2 metatarsals by falling over. And I went into the walk-in, ironically, at Warwick Hospital, so they've got A&E, but because my injury was to my foot, I didn't have to wait 8 or 9 hours. I was then ushered to a walk-in light injuries, and I was in and out within an hour and a half. So I'm not fed up with the NHS. And I think people who are fed up with the NHS will be people who are ill, waiting for operations. They've been cancelled, because I admire the NHS. But then, hypocritically, I now pay £70 a month for my wife and I to go private.
That's not that much, actually, for private care.
No.
Christine, what do you think?
I'm certainly not fed up with the NHS, but the NHS needs radical overhaul. I mean, it was a brilliant idea when it first came in, but that was a very long time ago now, and we cannot afford it. The trouble is there is no cash nexus with the NHS, so there is no incentive for people not to go and see their doctor, not to do this, not to do that. And we have got to... we cannot go on injecting taxpayers' money into it. We've got to bring more money in, and that means, for example, giving people tax relief to go private and also encouraging people. For example, everybody pays for their pension. When you're young, you should start building up your pension. People should start building up for insurance, because when you get older, you're going to need more healthcare. And why shouldn't you start putting a little bit of money aside? And you would easily be able to... For example, I've had 2 new knees and a new hip, and I had them done privately. I would have to have waited for 3 years for my knee. I couldn't walk properly, and it cost £15,000. Because I was insured, that was fine. And there's no reason... I took somebody, myself, off the waiting list.
Yeah, but you just said about putting a little bit of money in from when you're young. That's called national insurance. That's what people have been paying.
Yes, I know, but the cost of the health service has got so enormous. We're all living longer. We all want more and more operations. New knees weren't heard of when the health service came in. And in order to be able to give the massive amount of healthcare. I mean, we've already got the highest tax in 70 years. We cannot just go on taxing people.
The elephant in the room, of course, is that we are...
Nana, that is disgraceful.
He said it, I didn't.
The elephant in the room...
You said it.
He said it. He said the elephant in the room. I just pointed out who it was.
I was just using a very old expression. The elephant in the room, of course, is the fact that over the last however many years, 10, 15, 20 years, you know, the population of this country has expanded almost exponentially. Now, those people who come into this country, Nana's trying to make me laugh. For the benefit of those on radio, Nana's pulling her face. And I've lost my train of thought now, Nana.
Must have been
Basically, it's swamped and overwhelmed. That's my point.
Yeah. And also foreigners come in, people come in, they come in here, they're very, very pregnant, they suddenly go into labour, and then they have their foreigners who have no entitlement to our NHS.
Well, hang on.
Have their baby on the
Johnny
NHS.
Foreigner coming over here.
But listen, yeah, that is...
They haven't paid in on their national insurance.
OK, fair enough, but that is not really the main problem. I mean, OK, that is not great that a lot of people are using it as health tourism. That is something that happens all over the world anyway. But my problem with it is that's just a small portion. But it's the whole way it's organised. I mean, it's a mess.
Oh, it's a complete mess.
It's a complete mess. The couple of people coming from another country using our services won't be the reason why it's in the mess that it's in. It's in this mess because of the way it has been managed. There's too many managers.
Bring back matron, that's what we need to do.
Too many managers. The money's going to stupid things like rainbow crossings and diversity and inclusion. It's unbelievably bad. And I'm worried. I don't want to get sick. I don't get sick, I don't want to use it.
You've got private healthcare.
Yeah, but still, for the bigger things, certain private medical things won't cover, and you'll end up in NHS care, and that's the worry.
Yeah.
The other thing that disappointed me the other day was when Sunak was asked if he had private healthcare. We've just seen his tax returns, haven't we? We know he's one of the most wealthy people in the country. He should be paying for private healthcare. He shouldn't be a burden on the NHS. He can afford to pay it, and he hadn't got the... whatnots to say so.
He was scared. He didn't want to say.
When Margaret Thatcher was asked if she said, yes, I do, because I have a busy job and I want to be able to have my procedure when I want it, where I want it to fit in with my job. What's wrong with that?
May I just criticise one of your points? You said earlier on you should get some sort of tax break if you go private. Well, that's sort of counterintuitive as to what we're trying to do, because if you get a tax break, that's less money for the government coffers to fund the NHS. You either want to pay, in my case, £70 a month to dodge the queues, and I'm been open. That's what people do to dodge the queues. I'm not one of these types of people. I saw it on GB News the other day. I'm not going to name the presenter, but he said he actually goes private so that it can free up a space for someone. So that's his primary motivation. That's not true. Of course it's not. That's utter garbage.
That's a justification.
Yes, you should be open. If you've got some money...
No, that's not true.
That's not why they're doing it.
But when I phone up my GP and everything, I say, just refer me and get on with it, because I don't want to waste an appointment for somebody else who could really do with the appointment. I know what's wrong. I've been to see this, that, the other. No, you have to come in. I said, but you've already seen me. You know what it is. Just do the thing so I can use my private medical cover. And that's freeing up, and in my mind, and I say it to them, just to say that somebody else who really needs that.
So your primary motivation is
for somebody else to have that appointment that I don't need.
Come on, Nana. So
I've just told you that.
Actually, you get it free with GB News, don't you?
Talk about my private medical cover outside. You don't know that.
I've mentioned it before.
You don't know the deal. You don't know the deal. Honestly, right. Let's welcome our great British voice. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Right, where should we go? This time we'll go to Bristol. Let's have a chat with Lee Harris. Lee!
Bristol.
Love this. Yes, he's there in Bristol. Lee Harris, what do you think? OK, let's talk about the NHS. What do you think? I mean, is it even fixable? I don't think it is, but are you fed up with it?
I agree with a lot of what you said. You made some really good points. In fact, probably some of them I was going to make myself so I can skip through them. But I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm not fed up with the NHS like on its own specifically. I'm just fed up with everything else that's happening around it. Although I do think it's very badly run. I'm more fed up with the NHS being treated as some sort of religion or panacea that must not be criticised. I'm fed up of politicians treating it like a political football with zero commitment for any serious reform. All they end up doing is tinkering around the edges. And like you rightly pointed out, they just throw more and more money in it. It's a bottomless pit. And we don't see any meaningful improvement from that at all. I agree with you. This is mostly not about funding. That is a distraction. This is about the way we do healthcare in this country and how badly the NHS is run. I do fully accept, it has to be said, that lockdown has had a huge impact on public health and waiting lists, but the NHS has been broken for decades. You're right to point that out as well. I think it probably can be fixed, to directly answer your question, but it needs, as everyone has rightly said, it needs urgent root and branch reform, and we need to admit that we are not the envy of the world.
We're not the envy.
Personal point.
No, you're right.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on. Personal point. Make it brief, though. Thanks, Lee.
Well, my personal point is that I'm fed up of feeling worried that the NHS isn't going to be there for my family when I need them. I read more and more people are paying for private healthcare and ad hoc healthcare, and I completely get that. That's something that I do worry about. I've got a daughter and my wife. I want them to get treatment when they need it. If I have a heart attack or something, I want to be able to get an ambulance, and those things do play on your mind, and it worries me.
Well, that's the thing. So that's why I'm fed up with it as well. I mean, if I had a heart attack, how long would it take them? They probably wouldn't want to come for me anyway. Lee, thank you very much. It's really good to talk to you. That is Lee Harris. He's there in Bristol. He's our great British voice. Well, today I've been asking, are you fed up with the NHS? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Ryan says the NHS gets more than enough funding, but it's mismanaged and mass immigration has put huge pressure on it. It's supposed to be the National Health Service and not an international health service, kind of alluding to your point, Christine. Louise says if the NHS was an animal, you'd put it out of its misery. Yeah, you probably would. But Jackie says, the NHS is over. Why are we forced to pay for something that is of no use to us? Yeah, I sort of agree with you, Jackie, as well. I'd actually like to see it disbanded, I'm sorry.
I wouldn't say it's no use to
No,
us.
I'd like to see it disbanded, I genuinely would.
They're in extremis and emergencies.
No, I think I'd like to see it disbanded and there'd be a layer for people who can't afford any healthcare.
May I just make a really interesting point about what the great British voice said? He alluded to the fact that if he had a heart attack because he had private healthcare, he'd get an ambulance. That's not correct. You need the NHS first and then the private healthcare kicks in.
Well, that's what he's saying.
He was saying that. He wants the NHS.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly.
No, he said he wanted the... He has private healthcare, but he wants the NHS to be there.
I misheard.
He's just like all the rest of us.
Yeah, his knee's getting to him, obviously. Listen, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for World View. I'll be joined by political commentator Danny Armstrong and host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, to discuss the top stories around the globe. On the menu, Russia. Of course, they've assumed the position of President of the UN Security Council, with Ukraine calling to stop the move. And then at at 5, my celebrity guest will be with me in the studio. I'll give you one more clue. Think back to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's just coming up to 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and it's now time for World View. On the menu, Russia has assumed the position of President of the UN Security Council, with Ukraine calling to stop the move. Now, that is as the US journalist has been arrested in Russia after being accused of spying for the White House. Joining me to talk about that is political commentator and Russia expert Danny Armstrong. Danny, OK, so Russia assuming the UN Security Council presidency, what does that actually mean?
Well, it's a largely symbolic role. It's rotated between the 50 member states alphabetically, as it happens. It's the US and the UK will have their turn later on in the year. Now, the role of the president of the UN Security Council is to be the face of that entity.
Oh,
so
God.
it will set the agendas, it will make sure everything's running smoothly. Also, one of the interesting facts of the roles of that presidency is that the president may appeal to parties in a conflict to exercise restraint. Now, that's quite ironic, given the last time Russia was president was February 2022, when the invasion was announced by Vladimir Putin into Ukraine. It's largely symbolic, but there has been a big backlash from Ukraine. Ukraine has tried to block the move. Zelensky says we need a full reshuffle of the UNSC to prevent things like this happening. Zelensky has called it absurd and destructive, and there's a lot of other members of the Ukrainian government who have come out and said this is just a slap in the face.
Well, are there any other members from other countries who've criticised it, or is it just we're hearing just Ukraine?
We're hearing the main complaints from Ukraine, as you would expect. It's something that can't be prevented given the structure of the UNSC. But as I've explained...
that's terrible. They shouldn't. I think if you're in conflict, you shouldn't be allowed to do it. If you started a war, then I would expect that you've actually vetoed your chance to do that. But moving on to the US journalist who's been held in Russia, what do we know about that?
Well, this is Evan Gershkovich, who is a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He was collecting information on the Wagner private military company. As we know, they're fighting in Ukraine as we speak, in Bakhmut especially. They're the private army, essentially, of Russia. He was arrested for espionage. This is what Russia accuses him of. And he could be sentenced to 20 years in jail if found guilty.
In Russia?
Now, he's a well-respected, long-time journalist in Russia. Now, the Russian side have said, well, look, I mean, Julian Assange, he's been imprisoned by the West. He's been interrogated and tortured for threatening to release information on the US and the UK. So they think it's a little bit hypocritical that they have arrested a journalist. It could be for a prisoner swap to increase their cache of Westerners taken prisoner to swap for. There's been talk of Sergei Cherkasov, who was arrested in The Hague whilst working in Brazil as a spy for Russia. So, I mean, it's very, very layered, as these things normally are with Russia, but it could mean a prisoner swap. And Gershkovich, if he is sentenced, 99% of cases are people are found guilty in Russia when they're taken to court, so it could mean that he's arrested and then a prisoner swap will be in the offing.
Well, listen, Danny, thank you very much for that update. That's Danny Armstrong, he's a political commentator. Right, well, let's travel over to America now, and we're going to have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. Paul, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. What's the latest? Trump, guys, getting it. He's going to have his mugshot soon. He's Tuesday, Super Tuesday. It's going to be an interesting Tuesday. Talk me through it.
Super Tuesday. Yeah, they made us wait for a couple of weeks for the full action. But yeah, the witch hunt is in full swing now. It's very KGB. It's very show me the man and I'll show you the crime. But it's official that the Republican Party nominee for the 2024 presidential election is Donald J. Trump. That's the only game in town now. This thing has... Even the Republican Party are united. Even Jeb Bush is condemning these actions. But yes, Trump is due in New York on Tuesday to hear the as yet sealed charges. He doesn't even know what he's being charged with until Tuesday, where it's going to be read out in court. And obviously the top charge is having the temerity to go against the establishment. I mean, that's going to be the number one book they're going to throw at him. How dare he even point out it's rigged? So yeah, it's a free-for-all. And this is... Legally, this is probably going to flounder eventually. There was a politician called John Edwards who in 2004 used campaign money to hide the fact that he had a pregnant mistress. Now, he wasn't found criminally liable because they actually accepted, look, he wasn't trying to be a fraud. He was trying to keep the information away from his wife. So that's going to be the defense that Trump could always use. So it's going to fall apart. But this opens the door now for every other little no-mark DA to be throwing charges at Trump. So you're going to see more lawsuits, more criminal cases being thrown at Trump in the next... but he can still run, and he could be in jail and be president. That's the beauty of this country. It's amazing.
That's America. What about Joe Biden? He's not coming to the coronation. Is that a big deal? The Americans, do they care about that? Are they making a deal out of that?
No, they're not. No, I mean, Joe Biden talked about the shooting in Tennessee and did a joke about his favorite ice cream. So he can do anything as far as the mainstream press is concerned. So nobody is going to care about anything. I don't know if anybody's told Joe Biden that he's not coming to the coronation. I don't know even if he's aware, but he isn't now coming because my impeccable sources in the White House tell me that it's because they don't think he's up to it strength-wise. He's not fit to make that trip, but he is coming to Northern Ireland. So I don't know, maybe they just do a layover for a few weeks, you know?
Maybe it's just a bit too much for him to do, Paul. Listen, Paul, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. That is, of course, Paul Dudridge. He's there in LA. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. Thank you so much. Well, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Stay tuned. So much more to come in the next hour. Good afternoon, welcome aboard. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget you can stream us live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. Joining me today, it's broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Then at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. No, that was actually on a Saturday. It's outside. I've got a special guest who'll be live in the studio. Now, let me give you some clues. She's a TV personality who has a love for very rare cars. She's also somebody who used to have a very, very famous husband. Those are some of the clues. I'm sure you've worked it out. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their employers for hurt feelings? All of that after your latest news headlines.
It's 5 o'clock. Good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has rejected suggestions Brexit could be the cause of delays at the port of Dover. Holidaymakers trying to get away for the Easter break are still facing delays of up to 8 hours, despite extra services running overnight. Although port authorities say it is now half that long, so a 4-hour wait. Officials have blamed the delays on a lengthy immigration process. Ms Braverman, meanwhile, has singled out British-Pakistani men over concerns about grooming gangs as she prepares new measures to tackle child sexual abuse. The Home Secretary's accused authorities of turning a blind eye to signs of abuse over fears of being labelled racist or bigoted, suggesting political correctness is to blame. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, she says those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of sexual abuse. Safeguarding Minister Sarah Dines says it's a scourge of our society.
Can't stop in making sure that people are protected. Children are the most vulnerable part of our society, as well as the elderly. We must make sure that they're not sexually abused. So I don't accept we're going to be rife with false reports. There may be one or two, and they will be dealt with and identified. The overwhelming people that gave evidence are speaking the truth to the inquiry, and it was very heartbreaking testimony. We need to act.
The British government says it's in negotiations regarding the 3 men being held by the Taliban in Afghanistan. They include the holidaymaker, Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. It's unclear how long he's been held for. A humanitarian network assisting the other 2 men, that is the charity medic Kevin Cornwell and a second unnamed man, who were both detained in January, say it believes they are in good health and are being treated well. The United States is urging Russia to immediately release a journalist they've detained on suspicion of spying. Evan Gershkovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, pleaded not guilty to the charges earlier this week. Well, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov that the detention of a US citizen is unacceptable. Lavrov has responded he's accused Washington of trying to politicize the case and says Gershkovich's fate will be determined by a court. The White House has called on all US citizens living in or travelling to Russia to leave immediately. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder after a man died when he was hit by a van in Cramlington. Northumbria police say 2 men were injured in the car park of the Bay Horse pub last night. One was pronounced dead at the scene. The other remains in critical condition. Passport office workers are launching a 5-week strike from tomorrow as part of a bitter dispute over jobs, pay, pensions and conditions. More than 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union across 8 sites will walk out. They will mount picket lines outside several offices, including Glasgow, Liverpool, London, Belfast and Newport. The PCS General Secretary has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. And the Pope has led a Palm Sunday service in Rome a day after being sent home from hospital with bronchitis. Around 30,000 people came to watch Pope Francis opening the Easter celebrations, which mark the start of Holy Week. The 86-year-old was driven to St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City in the back of an open-top car as he passed through the crowds. The Pope, though, earlier this week on Wednesday was taken to hospital with breathing difficulties but returned home to the Vatican yesterday. This is GB News. More as it happens, as always. But now it's back to Nana.
It's just gone 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We are the People's Channel. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today, it's broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Still to come, each Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or somebody who's had an extremely interesting career, and take a look at life after the job. I talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today I've got a very, very special guest. Now, she has a love for vintage cars, owning a 1938 Bentley, which was inherited from her father. Can you guess who she might be? She's a blonde bombshell. And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurty feelings? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is receiving criticism from his fellow Tories after backing the Worker Protection Bill. Now, this bill, which is slightly going under the radar, seems to offer new protections for workers who face abuse, harassment and unfair discrimination. But it could make it easier for employers to face litigation against their employees. Now, is this an assault on our freedom of speech? Stay tuned to find out more about that. Then at 5:50, another story that caught my eye. According to the reports, Animal Rebellion has planned to sabotage the Grand National in a secret poll. I'll be joined by a racehorse owner to get the latest. You can always email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. So it is time for this week's Outside. Now, my very special guest is a television presenting legend. Now, she has a fascinating career spanning across various different industries. She started out as a fashion designer and then hit our TV screens as a presenter. You may recognise her from her appearances on This Morning, Wish You Were Here and The Verdict. She's also written a book called The Rabbit Whisperer, which tells the story of her love for rabbits and their unique personalities. And she also enjoys running and has even completed the London Marathon and the Great North Run. She loves travelling to remote places in extreme parts of the world. And in 2008, she made headlines when she divorced her former spouse, Chris Tarrant. However, she has since moved on and continued to pursue her passions. My guest has also lived a diverse, exciting life, and we're thrilled to join here today and share her experiences. Who do you think she is? Of course, the amazing Ingrid Tarrant. Ingrid!
Hi, Nana.
Wow, you've done so much.
I have done an awful lot. I haven't wasted a second of my life. It's been crammed, and that was because of my parents. They were very lively, they were adventurous, they introduced so much, they opened our eyes to the world. So we were very, very fortunate, I have to say.
So some people don't know, but were your parents famous? Tell us a little bit about them.
No, not at all. My father, well, I'm really a mongrel. So my father was half French, half German, and my mother Norwegian, so we were, you know, very...
Although I don't think you can use that word anymore. I think they called it mixed race these days, so apologies if anyone was offended. I don't think they would be, but...
Oh,
yeah. Oh, but carry on. No, go on, carry on.
I can't get round all
I know,
this
I can't
anyway.
either, but just in case anyone was offended.
What, so what, mongrel?
No, you can't, don't say it again. Apologies, just in case you're offended by that. She's going to say it again. Well, she doesn't mean it offensively. She simply means mixed race. Just because, you know, there's so many different things you can't say these days.
But I'm a bitch.
No, you can't say that either. Look, here we go. Don't apologise if anyone was offended by that. Should we get rid of her? I've had enough of her. But seriously, if you were offended, we do apologise. She's not meant to cause offence.
I won't be able to talk.
No, you can. So I'll just be doing that. It'll be like a river right.
Yes, no.
So your parents, you're a mix, yes. So carry on. So talk.
Yeah. So we were brought up multicultural. Can I say that?
Yeah, of course you can. I'll let you know. Don't worry.
Yes. So we travelled an awful lot. My father, the family business, manganese and iron ore, and then he was introduced to this concept of fool's gold. It wasn't found in water, but it's found in rock, and it was mica. So so it was in 3 countries in the world. He chose to mine it in South Africa, and then that sort of evolved from there.
Did it make him rich?
Come comfortable.
Oh, that's good, isn't it? As we like to hear that.
Yes.
So a lot of people won't realise, because obviously you're married to Chris Tarrant, so what he did sort of overshadowed what you were doing, because people might not have seen what you were doing. So talk to me about the stuff that you did, because I know you were you've got a fashion brand, you've done loads, you were a fashion designer.
Yes, when I left school, then I went and I did a course in fashion design. And then, by sheer coincidence, I was at a boarding school, so it was very international, and one of my close friends was American, and her boyfriend was English, and he had this business that to like try his hand out on it, and it was a fashion business. And my girlfriend said, you know, what have you done? Because she left earlier. Anyway, we lost touch, and I just said, this is what I've done, and now I'm looking for a job. And she said, well, why don't you work for my boyfriend? So I did, and I ended up buying the company.
Oh, wow.
I know, it was amazing. It was one of those... It's fate. Unfortunately, his mother died, and sort of like they really kind of took their eye off the ball and everything, and I ended up just running the daily process. And then I went off on a travel trip to sell the designs and everything, and took the orders, and another complication. Anyway, I won't go into detail because it takes too long, but I ended up buying the company. And then doing that, so I started exporting, and then and it was a bit boring because you have to be quite staid, you know, and classic. And then I did the English market, and that was really avant-garde, and it was brilliant.
When did you meet Chris then, and how did you meet him?
I met Chris at TVAM. I met he's my second ex-husband as well, actually. So I met my first ex-husband at ITN, where I was working, and my second one at TVAM. And I was working there. And I've never worked for anybody since, because I don't want to meet a third, so I'll just sort of in the workplace. So I met him there, and I had no idea who he was. I wasn't a TV addict at all, so I'd never seen Tiswas or OTT. And
I used to love Tiswas.
Yeah, everybody talked to me about it. And after...
It was so good. They'd spit the dog and everything, Rob Cowdery's. Oh, it was amazing. Oh.
I knew about them afterwards, but I said, well, how come I never saw you? Who was on the other side? And it was...
Sally James, wasn't it?
He was with Sally James, but I said, why didn't I see that show? Why has it just kind of like missed my entire life? And he said it was Noel Edmonds' The Multicoloured Swatch Shop. And I said, oh, yeah, I watched that. Yeah. So I said, I obviously preferred him to you.
If you think about that TV now, it's so boring, that swap shop. I used to actually watch a little bit, then I got a bit annoyed with it after a while.
Yeah,
just swapping stuff. That used to really irritate me.
What it was really about, but anyway.
Now, so you were at TVM, you met Chris Tarrant, and then kind of what did you do there? What happened? How did you...
Well, then I was the first employee to be pregnant with my daughter, my second child, Fia. And luckily, they took a vote, because the company hadn't existed for 2 years. You have to be there for 2 years and whatever. And it was 18 months in, so that they said sort of, I could stay on, which was really nice, maternity leave, and still have my job.
Come back,
But in the meantime, I left my first husband. My daughter was 4 months old, and sort of, did it alone, sort of thing. And then during the time that I was at TVAM, then Chris joined, just a small little section, summertime sort of special thing. And we met. I did not fall in love with him, and it wasn't love at first sight, I can tell you. In actual fact, when I just sort of saw this sort of like thing on screen, it was like, who is that? I can't say the word, but anyway. Don't say it. Oh, gosh, I can't get into more trouble. I've said 2 things already, so I'm not going to say any more. Anyway, no, I said Pratt, actually. I was going to say something else. I can say that.
You thought that, but obviously don't think that now.
Yes, no. Anyway, so that was that. So eventually I got to know him and gradually fell in love with him.
Did he ask you out? What did they say? Hey, you want to go out with me? What was the first
thing?
date?
No, it wasn't really. It just, I think it was... we just all kind of congregated in the pub, as one does, or does one anymore?
I know what you mean. It sort of evolves. I had one like that. I didn't like him at the start, and he sort of crept on me, type thing.
Yes, but they do that.
Not in a horrible way.
On me, yeah,
he sort of grew on me, crept on me.
Yes.
Grew on me.
And yes, and he was thoroughly lovely and charming, and
then what happened?
And fell in love with him.
And then what happened?
And then what happened? And then.
And what happened after that? What happened?
And then we ended up living together. He was based in Warwickshire at the time. I had a house, and he moved in with me. And then he got the job at Capital Radio.
And was it... I'm quite nosy. I mean, was it a lovely relationship and everything?
Oh, yes.
Lovely.
Oh, it was lovely.
So,
yes.
So when you discovered he had an affair, were you sort of blindsided by it, or were you...
Oh, completely.
Really?
Yes, completely. I mean, I know everybody says, of course you knew, of course you knew.
No, but you didn't.
I didn't. I asked him what was the matter, you know, sort of like, have I done anything wrong, or sort of like, is he thinking of having an affair, or in actual fact, is he having an affair? Because if I said black, he would say white, if it was hot, it was cold, and he swore absolutely blind that he wasn't. And I believed him. And it wasn't being, you know, in denial. I'm not like that,
no.
Nana. I am completely so sort of upfront and grounded and straight.
Well, that's why you believed him, because sometimes you think people are like you and they're not.
And then, but I had really no proof, so I got private detectives onto him.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so I got the pictures, and that actually was horrendous.
OK.
Because I was hoping it wouldn't be true. At that point, you just sort of think, well, anyway, but that was that, and it was, well, this is a complete no-no, so that was the end of it, full stop.
I think the same. If I found the partner that I was with, I'm single, nobody wants me, but if I did find a partner who I was with, I don't want them either, and I discovered that they were having an affair, I'd just be like, yeah, get out, I can't be bothered. Just because I can't be bothered, I don't want that.
Well, you never trust them again.
Well, no, it'll take me too long. I know I will never, so there's no point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so you moved on? Have you got a new man?
No,
Can't be bothered.
Can't be bothered, and I love being a singleton. So I've got a few friends, sort of gay friends, which is always fun and nice. I go, oh, Ingrid, sort your hair out a little bit. I wish I had a gay friend of mine with me here today, actually sorting my hair out a little bit. But no, and I've got really lovely male friends, platonic friends. It's really lovely. I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much. I don't want to be tied down. I don't want to be encumbered. I'm very free, and I'm good on my own. I've always been good on my own.
Same here. I'm too good on my own. And I'm too selfish, and I ain't sharing nothing.
No, but my mother said to me, like, 2 divorces, oh dear, this is terrible. And she said, darling, she said, men love to feel needed. Just be sort of like be needy and everything. They love to feel wanted and everything. I said, I just can't do that. So she said, well, try. So I tried by not changing a light bulb and something like that. And I was like, oh, God, I can't be bothered. I'll just do it all. I'll fill the holes and put up that shelf and... so I am very, very independent.
Yeah, that's true. Though you have to act a little bit needy.
It's difficult.
It's difficult. I've struggled with that as well.
It lasts about a minute.
What about your? I love cars, and you've got a classic car. Talk to me about that car.
It was my father's. He blames my mother for being late for meeting him for tea at the Ritz. He said you were late, and because you're late, I've gone off and bought a car. She wasn't late at all. Just maybe a minute. So he bought it. So it's been in the family since about 1950.
It's a Bentley, isn't it?
It's a Bentley. It's a 1938 4.25-litre Bentley Vandenpla. And there's only, I believe, 3 in the world. And because war stopped production. And don't know where the others are. I think one is in... Or I don't think. I am told it's possible. One's in India and one's in South Africa. And I've got the one... that's here. It's beautiful.
Is it worth a lot? It's probably worth.
I have no idea. Yeah. I've got it insured for probably what my father paid for it.
You need to sort that out.
I know. Let's just hope that it doesn't go up in flames or anything. So it's never going to be sold. So I'm not interested in what it's worth.
But it's interesting. I mean,
Fia, my daughter's going to have it. She's absolutely the right person to inherit.
She's delighted. So what are you doing now then? Because I know you do stuff. Are you still doing stuff with QVC?
No, so I did QVC for quite a long time, which was fantastic. A wonderful designer, so I was a brand ambassador, and it was a wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a little bit. Actually, this is one of hers.
Oh, very nice.
Yong Kim.
Yong Kim.
She's called, yeah. But they don't do that brand anymore. So when she went, I went. But it was absolutely fantastic. Live TV. It was great fun. Wonderful. You know one of the presenters.
I love live TV.
Debbie,
I know Debbie Flint. She's great. She's fabulous.
Exactly. So I don't do that anymore. But it was nice to get back into the world of fashion. Although it wasn't what I was doing when I was in fashion, it was much more kind of quirky. But yes, and then so I wrote. I did travel articles as well because I travelled. I've always travelled, always wanted to travel. And my father, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I said to my father, "My ambition is to travel the world." Well, he asked what my ambition was. And I said to travel the world and have a company that gets listed on the the stock exchange.
On the FTSE 100.
But I didn't say that when I was about 10 or 11. I said that when I was a little bit older. But I wanted to travel the world. So he said, well, that's a very good ambition to have. How many countries are there? And I worked out then that there were 238. But if you Google it now, I think it's 197, which is extraordinary because so many countries have broken up. But I'm almost there.
Really?
Yeah, I've done about 117
Really?
countries.
Oh, you've got quite a few to go. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, still a few to go, but I'm more than halfway.
You're more than halfway. That's good. Is that what you're going to be doing now, then? So that's your thing?
Yeah, well, I was going to do all the stans this year, minus, like, 1 or 2. But,
yeah, probably. And how do you stay there for long, or do you just go in and say, I've been here, then you...
No, I'm not like a Japanese tourist. I really go and I meet the locals. If I can gate crash their home. I've gate crashed wedding parties.
Do you go on your own? Do you go on your own?
I've been on my own. I've gone with friends. Unfortunately, friends of mine are getting kind of old and a little bit... They're wanting their luxuries. You see, I still go trekking, and nobody really wants to go trekking with me, so I went backpacking with my son when he did his post-uni gap year. He's the only person who would do it, so I thought, OK, great, rucksack on the back.
So you're travelling, you're doing TV stuff and...
Yep, and I was writing a lot, and, yes, all sorts of things.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. It's lovely to talk to you, Ingrid.
Thank you very much. That went very quickly.
It did, didn't it? It's so interesting. That is the fabulous Ingrid Tarrant. She's a broadcaster and a television personality and a whole lot more. Right, well, coming up, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurty feelings? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing backlash from within his own party after he backed a bill that could leave employers at higher risk of litigation. Critics have warned workplaces could turn into police states. We'll be discussing that in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's coming up to 25 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome on board. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? You've missed most of the show, but we do have 35 minutes to go, so it's all good. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio, and it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurt feelings? Now, that is true. This is what this thing is about. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is receiving criticism from his own party after backing the Worker Protection Bill. Now, the bill seeks to offer new protections to employees who face abuse, harassment and unfair discrimination. Now, this could mean that doctors, shop assistants and bar staff could take legal action against their employers if a member of the public insults them. But what does this mean for the average workplace? Well, could the slip of a tongue cause a costly court case? It's pretty tricky to say. I don't know the person who wrote that, obviously. Costly court case. Is this an assault on free speech? What do you think? A significant number of senior Tory MPs seem to think so. They warned that the proposed law will lead to an explosion of litigation and force business owners to run their establishments like a police state. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurt feelings? I'm joined now by Communications Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and former editor of The Labourist, Peter Edwards, and the leader of the SDP, William Clouston, and television personality Nana Akua. Right, so who shall I start with? I'm going to start, I'll do it with you, Reem, because you're here in the studio. Reem, what do you think? I mean, this is a bit of legislation that's come in, and some of the terminology makes it a bit loose and available to be manipulated.
Well, of course, I mean, being hurt, having hurt feelings is entirely subjective. This is the exact same problem that arises from the online safety bill, right? This legal but harmful definition that is incredibly subjective, this psychological harm from the online safety bill. I mean, again, look, when it comes to suing your employer, there are numerous reasons why you might want to sue your employer. However, a customer being rude to you should not be the reason to. I mean, anybody that's worked in customer service knows that customers can be incredibly rude, and it is not the fault of your employer. This will then, of course, open up a huge amounts of bombshell litigations across businesses across the country, and I think actually will cause a lot of those businesses to end up having to close down to pay for it.
Well, let's go to William Clouston. William, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this not for the first time progressives are ruining a good cause by overextending it. Discouraging harassment is a good idea, but this particular bill, it's not surprising also that it's proposed by Lib Dems, who think we can sort of arbitrate our way into harmony. The problem, as has been said, is the third parties. How does an employer control a customer? I mean, how does an employer control what a customer does when the customer goes into a pub or a cafe or whatever? It's unreasonable to think that an employer can do that. So I think this is an overstep, and not for the first time something is proposed by the Lib Dems or other progressives, and not for the first time the Tories are asleep at the wheel.
Because it's gone past the first reading and the second reading, and if that kind of keeps slithering, it'll be a law. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I don't think there's too much that's progressive about the Lib Dems. There's been a decade-long assault on workers' rights. To look at one example, if someone works in a supermarket and is racially abused, that's a criminal offence already, and quite rightly so. And I also look briefly at who's bringing in this bill in the House of Lords, Laura Lee Burt, who was a Lib Dem MP. Yet it was a Lib Dem-backed coalition that led that assault on workers' rights under David Cameron, around employment tribunals, around making collective redundancies, and so on and so on. So I think the Lib Dems to pose as defenders of workers' rights is hypocritical and nonsense.
Because it's the word harassment that is the problem. Narinder?
Well, I don't think it's unreasonable, because you can't build a business on the exploitation and abuse of staff. And it is about repeated harassment, because why should, say, for example, a bar lady who's working a pub constantly be having to be exposed to a customer that's coming in to sexually harass her? It has to be on the onus of the employer to make sure that that doesn't happen. That's not unreasonable. That's actually correct. You know, we have to have policy in place preventing any kind of abuse or hate. It's not about hurt feelings. This is about clear routes to respond and report to this kind of abuse. No one should be expected to go to work to face abuse. Why should they?
Well, can I ask, Narinder, just very briefly, are you a boss? Are you an employer? Have you ever been an employer?
I worked in a shop, in my parents' shop, where customers would be abusive, but my family made sure that customer could not come back in the shop.
Okay, so in that shop, let's take the shop then. So if you employed somebody working in the shop and a customer came in and was abusive to the person working in that shop, you would be the person held to account. As the owner of the shop, you would be held to account, not the person who's not the abusive person. Not the customer, no.
We would look after our employee. That is the purpose of the Workers' Protection Bill, is the employer has to make sure that their employee is safe and not at risk. Over 50% of women in hospitality have experienced sexual harassment. As the employee, it's my job to make sure they're safe.
In what world is the customer going to be... In what world is the employer responsible for a customer's behaviour? They cannot control what the customers are doing. That is
you ban them.
Absolutely
if it's
absurd.
Repeated.
But how can an employer control it?
We ban customers. We won't let them back in the shop.
Yeah, but the abuse might have happened before.
Exposed.
Yeah, but what if somebody said something horrible and I've got hurty feelings, so I said, right, that's it, and it's only happened once, and then I go and I sue you.
The bill isn't about just once. The bill isn't about just once. The bill is repeated harassment.
No, it could be once. Peter, what do you think? Because it doesn't sound like you support it either.
Well, I would struggle to support anything that's allegedly in the name of workers' rights that's introduced by the Lib Dems. I mean, I think we can all agree there's a problem. And I've worked in pubs, I've worked in a supermarket, and I've even worked as a postman. And, most people are nice to you, but occasionally they're not. But some of the things we're talking about are criminal offences already. Of course, there's a burden on any employer to be a good employer and stand up for their staff. My worry is that some of the coalition reforms have reduced the threshold for employers to protect their employees. And actually, if you're an ordinary worker, particularly on low pay, the climate's much tougher due to pay and trade union legislation than it was 10 years ago.
William, what do you think they should really be doing? And can we stop this thing? Because how far is it down the line?
It's not. It's a bill. It's not an act yet. It hasn't been approved. The Tories wanted to stop this. They could and they should stop it. There is existing legislation that covers most of this. And if they allow this, it'll have a chilling effect on debate, I think, in pubs and cafes throughout the country. Is wrong. I think you ask any doorman to a nightclub or a bar, busy bar, how many times would you hear things that you could consider harassment? You'd be finished within an evening. That's the reality. So in the real world, this is not a practical bit of legislation. It's overextension.
Narendra.
I think that's completely unfair to say that a man that works at the door, that's part of his job, and actually he's expected that a woman shouldn't expect to go to work and be sexually harassed. And it's about protecting these women and other people who are constantly harassed. An employer has to take those rights and they have to put in proper policy. And I support this Workers' Protection Bill. This isn't woke nonsense. This is correct.
So Narendra, you're essentially saying that it's okay for these male people on the doorsteps of nightclubs to be harassed, but actually when it's a woman behind the bar, then it's not okay. Why is there that double standard?
Well, listen.
Neither of that is acceptable. But the man above said that it was, that actually this isn't correct, and this happens all day long. We must accept it. Neither should accept this.
Okay.
Neither of this should be accepted.
We're running out of time. I could listen to you guys for ages. Thank you so much. Reem Ibrahim, political commentator. Peter Edwards, former editor of the Labour List. William Clausen, thank you very much, leader of the SDP, and also TV personality Narendra Kaur. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with our Great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurt feelings? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christian Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hi there, it's 5:33. Good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Port of Dover says passengers are still facing waits of between 6 to 8 hours despite extra ferry services running overnight. It is still struggling to clear the backlog of Easter getaway traffic. Port officials are blaming slower border processing, although the Home Secretary maintains that's got nothing to do with Brexit. Passport office workers begin their 5-week strike tomorrow as part of a bitter dispute over jobs, pay, pensions and conditions. And more than 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union across 8 sites will walk out. The PCS has written to the government calling for urgent talks in a bid to resolve the matter. The Home Secretary says political correctness is to blame for failures in dealing with grooming gangs. Suella Braverman is to introduce new measures to tackle child sexual abuse tomorrow. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, she says those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of abuse. It follows an independent inquiry last year which described sexual abuse of children as an epidemic. And the government says it's in negotiations regarding the 3 British men being held by the Taliban in Afghanistan. They include the holidaymaker Miles Routledge, a man who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. It's unclear how long he has been held for. It's understood the other 2 men, that's the charity medic Kevin Cornwell and a second unnamed man, are both in good health. They were detained in January, according to a humanitarian rights group working with them. More on that story and all of our other news headlines in our later bulletins. We'll be back in about half an hour. This is GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Well, stay with us on GB News. Lots more to come. Lots of your messages coming in as well with regard to hurty feelings. Keep them coming at GB News. You can tweet me or send me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. The Great British Debate, I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurt feelings? That's coming up after this. And then at 5:50, another story that caught my eye. Tory MP Lee Anderson has slammed the BBC's choice of the UK's representative in this year's Eurovision Song Contest. That's due to her woke ideology and dislike towards Boris Johnson. What do you think about that? We'll be discussing that after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon. This is coming up to 40 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget, you can download the GB News app for free. I'm Nana Akua. Right, so it's time for a great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurty feelings? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak receiving criticism from his own party after backing the Worker Protection Bill. Now, the bill seeks to offer new protections to employees who face abuse, harassment and unfair discrimination. And this could mean that doctors, shop assistants and bar staff could take legal action against their employers if a member of the public insults them. So what does this actually mean for the average workplace? Well, could the slip of a tongue cause costly court cases? Is this an assault on freedom of speech? What do you think? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should employees be able to sue their bosses for hurt feelings? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and author Christian Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Well, it's not written on there, I'm just saying it now, but I'm being nice. It's
my title.
Hurty feelings. Hurty feelings. I mean, it's harassment is the word.
OK, I agree with Narinder to a certain extent.
Oh, really? Why?
Yeah, because if you're an employer and you allow let's call them offenders, if you allow repeat offenders to come into the place of work and, OK, sexually harass. I think she was on about sexual harassment, but you're on about hurty feelings. They're totally different.
Well, that's right. So the bill enables the definition of what is encompassed within it to be a lot looser. So therefore, sexual harassment, that's already covered. But the fact that they've turned it into harassment, which means that could be a lot of things. I could just call you something and you go, she's harassed me, then you could tell GB News to get me in trouble to sue.
May I say, I think you do harass him on a fairly regular basis.
I think he harasses me back.
You are quite unfair to my friend.
Oh, but Danny likes it. Danny's laughing. You're saying that. Listen to you. You can talk. You're just bad. Sometimes you join in. I've heard you join in.
I have thick skin. Don't say anything.
I didn't say anything.
I said don't say anything.
I didn't say anything. He said it.
I don't... Listen, anyway, go back to Narinder. Yeah. She mentioned she was brought up in a shop with her Indian mum and dad. And if her Indian mum and dad constantly allowed racists to come through the doors, not that Narinder would ever sue her mum and dad, but if you juxtapose that with an employer and an employee relationship, then I would say, Gaffer, why are you allowing me to be racially abused? But that's an extremity. We're talking about hurty feelings.
But that's already covered. That's already covered. We're talking about hurty feelings. I say something, you don't like it, then you say, GB News, she said that to me. But somebody else might hear that and think, oh, that's fun.
It's all to do with the interpretation, and it's so subjective about hurt feelings.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the law needs to be more defined rather than subjectiveness, because Christine's right. You know, you take the mickey out of my size, and I could say, do you know what? I'm really fed up with Nana taking the mickey out of my size. I'm going to sue GB News. But I think if you would have found out earlier on in our relationship that I was sensitive, and you wouldn't have done it.
No, I wouldn't. So, for example, I know I'll push it as far as I'm allowed to push it, but I'll be friendly and I'm kind. So I wouldn't want to hurt somebody's feelings if they were sensitive.
You're not a bully. I wouldn't say you were kind, but I wouldn't say you were bully.
See, look, I'm getting hurt feelings now.
There you go.
I'm going to sue your garage. Hang on.
There you go.
What if you haven't got a boss? What do I do then?
I know, it's just open.
It doesn't
it's
work.
Like a colander. There's so many holes in it.
Yeah, there's too many holes in it. What do you think?
Well, the point is, you've covered this. The extreme cases, of course, people need protection.
It's already covered by law.
It's already covered. This is a ludicrous... It's a classic example of these bills that go shooting through on a Friday afternoon when absolutely nobody is there. I am amazed that the government actually didn't make sure that somebody was there to shout object, and that would have stopped it in its tracks. It would have then had proper debating time, except it wouldn't, because the government wouldn't make time for it. It's now going shooting off to the House House of Lords, where goodness knows how much parliamentary time will be wasted debating it. It's ludicrous. It's completely ludicrous. It's far too over the top, far too loose, and we will end up, if this gets passed, we will end up with no end of ridiculous cases.
Well, could you imagine? It's ridiculous.
It's a typical Lib Dem fuddle.
Well, Rob Bright sent a message in saying, we go to work to earn our money. It's not playtime or a nice experience day. Honestly, cast off the cotton wool and grow up. I'm with you. Right, well, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Today, I've got 2 of you, not 4. Some of them have vanished. So I've got Alan at McNeely there in Grimsby. Alan, start me off. What do you think? Hurty feelings?
Good afternoon, Nana. Well, I think any policy that's put forward by the non-democratic Liberal Party should be treated with the greatest of suspicion. It seems to me that it's absolutely bonkers. Does this mean that if I'm sitting in a pub having a conversation with a friend and someone overhears the conversation and they're offended by what we're talking about, that employee can then go and sue their employer? It just seems to be absolutely bonkers, Donna.
Adam Wildsmith, you're there in Durham. What's your view on this?
I think the trouble is with so much of this legislation is it's so ambiguous. We saw it with the online safety bill when it was legal but harmful. Nobody could really define that. And then when it comes to offensive, nobody can define this either. Even the Lib Dem co-sponsors of this bill admit that offence is subjective. So it seems slightly draconian in my opinion. I mean, you've invited me on this show this afternoon. If I now say something that hurts your feelings, are you going to be able to sue GB News? And it seems strange that you'd be able to sue GB News, but not me, the person who said it. So it just seems quite bonkers in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alan in Grimsby and Adam in Durham. Thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, that is so true, isn't it? I mean, it's just so subjective. But let's move on to another story. This one caught my eye today. It's an article in the Mail on Sunday. It revealed an animal rebellion had planned to sabotage the Grand National in a secret plot. It's not that secret, seeing as it was on the front cover. It's believed that they intended to glue themselves together as a human barricade and stand across the course. So to discuss this, I'm joined by racehorse owner Abby McGregor. Abby, thank you so much for joining me. Abby, talk to me about this and how ridiculous it is. What's your view?
Well, I think it's absolutely disgraceful. What they're planning to do is stop thousands, millions of people experiencing the thrill and exhilaration of what is one of the best sporting events on the Great British calendar and one of the most famous and well-loved races in the world. And so I think it's time we called out these people for what they are. They're extremists who want to force their authoritarian views on people by dressing it up as compassion for animals. So even if you don't watch horse racing, everybody should be very concerned by these maniacs having no qualms about launching an attack on what is a world-class Great British sport. Because if they succeed in killing off horse racing, what will they do next?
Well, of course, they're the vegans, aren't they? So it's a whole vegan thing, was it? Because isn't that the reason why they're doing it? Is it like a vegan society or something?
Well, they quite often say that they're doing it for the welfare of the horses. But let's be clear, our welfare record is exemplary. It's the best it's ever been. So the stick that the jockeys use is harmless and energy absorbing. The colours of the obstacles are now white instead of orange because it's visually better for the animals. Our veterinary teams are as fast as they are outstanding. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that one day we're going to get to 0 fatalities and 0 injuries. And I think most sensible people out there will understand that. It's our job to make sure that our horses and our athletes are as safe as possible. But like all sports, there is an element of risk, and horses aren't used for anything else now than sport. We don't eat them. We don't use them for ploughing the fields. So these horses wouldn't be alive had it not been for horse racing, and they certainly wouldn't be as well cared for. So whilst we'll always take steps to ensure that welfare is the best it can be, what we can't do is mess with the integrity of the sport, because for me, races like Ascot and the Grand National, they're a part of what it means to be British, and we can't let these extremists win in trying to destroy our great sport.
Lovely. Abby McGregor, thank you so much for joining me. She's a racehorse owner. Her views. Thank you very much. Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Christine Hamilton and Danny Kelly. Christine, what do you think about that?
Well, it's so cruel to the horses, as these people allege. Why do horses, riderless horses, continue on round the course, jumping with everybody else? If they really hated it, they wouldn't, would they? They would just tail off. And as your guest said, they have improved security, safety, absolutely no end. What I would like to see, if these idiots do glue themselves together across the course, I would just raise the starting gates and let the horses go and see if they like that.
And it's animal rebellion, isn't it? That's what they call themselves. Like instinction rebellion.
Fight back!
Yeah.
Any organisation with the word rebelling at the end, I seem to think they're all idiots. What they're underestimating, these middle-class lunatics are underestimating the fact that at the Grand National on a Saturday, there are thousands of drunk, mostly lads from working-class areas who get shipped into Liverpool to enjoy the greatest spectacle in the equine calendar. And believe you me, if you have 30 people glue themselves, you'll soon need Merseyside police to actually prevent a lynch, because these people won't take the middle-class, whatever they're called, vegan rebellion lightly. I promise you now, you would have all of these scallies running onto the pitch and they'd get battered. I don't condone it. I wouldn't want to see a horse clip anyone, but they would get, I know they'd get battered.
You don't agree with me, just let them.
No, I don't want to. I don't, because you're going to kill someone.
But that was a joke, by the way.
But what
all I'm saying is that would be the inevitability of it. Christine's theory is uninevitable. You don't have to allow the horses to clatter into them. Is that a word?
The horses are absolutely loved and adored by their owners.
I hate the race, jockeys. Though. I can't watch it.
Really, well, they
I can't watch it. I watch it through my fingers sometimes.
I understand what you're saying, but they have improved the safety aspect beyond recognition in the last, 20 years?
Well, yeah, and you know, I don't like to see cruelty to animals, but I don't think they're being cruel.
They're not, because I said, why do the horses who have dumped their riders, why do they keep going on? Why do they keep jumping the
Maybe they think they can run
with
away.
everybody else?
I just sold Ironically, I sold a car to an equine vet who goes around the country to these meetings, and unfortunately she has to put them down sometimes. Picking the car up on Tuesday. Lovely woman.
All sport is dangerous.
On that bombshell,
sport is dangerous.
Time to move on to Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Let's start with Danny's supplement, which is about Putin being the richest man in the world. And I don't have my supplement, so hopefully it's in the thing.
Apparently, the biggest, vilest thug on planet Earth may also be the richest man in the world. He seems to have amassed $200 billion fortune with palaces, planes, yachts, and of course he's got an expensive taste in coats. So this violent thug could potentially, because don't forget, in 1991, with the fall of the USSR, all of these major companies, like the energy companies, they were all up for grabs. The national companies that the Muscovites had to rely on to get around the country, etc., etc., all of them were sold off at preferential rates to his thuggish mates, and he's at the top of the pyramid.
Well, of course he would be. He wouldn't be at the bottom, would he?
Putin?
Yes.
Oh, did I not say him?
You didn't. I don't think so.
You didn't.
Putin, that thug.
Apologies if you
carefully
did
might be watching
because
he might not be happy with you. Christine, now let's have a look at your supplement. What's yours about?
Well, this isn't even a supplement. This was on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Sunday Telegraph. Farmers are ordered to feed cows methane suppressants to help reach net zero. It's to stop them belching from one end and farting from the other end. I promise you, ministers, it isn't April the 1st, is it? Ministers are planning to force farmers to give their livestock compound feeds that contain additives to reduce gassy digestion.
I suggest Nana
terrible.
includes that.
A cow that's additive food.
I suggest Nana includes that in her diet. You trump me on this story as well.
14%. 14. This is why it's serious. Listen to me. This is why it's serious, because apparently 14% of the total carbon emissions created by human activity comes from cows.
Yeah, but I thought
hens.
Yeah, but isn't there something else that actually comes a lot from us as well?
Well, yes, but we'll all be... That'll be the next one, won't it? We'll all be given this special methane suppressant.
I don't want a methane suppressant. I wonder what it does to them. I'm worried about what...
It's natural to fart.
Yes. And on that bombshell, I think you can say that.
All
no,
you
can't. We apologise.
On that bombshell.
Oh, very good, very good. On the bombshell.
They're going to adopt the plan for sheep as well.
Oh, God, no. Listen, we need to know what the aftermath is going to be, what it affects and how it damages them, and when we eat it, what it does to us. But on my supplement, now, over to my supplement, and this one is the BBC's choice of the UK's representative in this year's Eurovision, which has been criticised by Tory MPs over her political views. Now, Lee Anderson accused the BBC of trying to plant mount a left-wing entrant into the competition following the surfacing tweets from May Muller, who said that Boris Johnson didn't deserve an ICU bed as the then Prime Minister when he was in hospital when he nearly died of COVID. I mean, that's what a horrendous thing to say. She branded the Tories as racist elites and said that Boris didn't deserve.
Well, that is awful. Lee Anderson sounds stupid, though. The BBC aren't planting.
Lee Anderson's not stupid. Yes. Don't say that. He's coming to work here and he's a lot bigger than you.
Well, look.
Not width-ways, but it's taller.
No, I like most of what he says. I like most of what he says, but he loses credibility when he says it's a BBC plant. That's just farcical.
Well, I don't think it's farcical. I just think that he's just sort of talking about the way the BBC...
Having spent 15 years as one of the top...
You've got it in there.
One of the top chat show hosts at the BBC, I can assure you it's not a plant.
Christine?
Well, it isn't the BBC who have chosen her. She was apparently... I mean, I'm not interested in the Eurovision Song Contest. She was apparently chosen by a public vote, but the fact is that she has made these horrendous slurs against the then Prime Minister, saying he didn't deserve to be in a hospital bed.
That's awful.
And this woman, girl, whatever she is representing us at the Eurovision Song Contest, and that is what is wrong.
May I just say something very quickly? When Boris Johnson left hospital, I presented it as a positive story, and I was admonished by the BBC.
Well, listen, on today's show, don't worry about it. You knew you got the BBC in twice then. Right, on today's show, we've been asking, are you fed up with the NHS? And according to our Twitter poll, 68% of you say yes, and 32% of you say no. Thank you so much to my panel, author and broadcaster, Christine Hamilton. And broadcaster journalist Danny Kelly.
Car dealer. Thank you.
Danny, yeah. And thank you so much to you at home for your company. I'll be back next Saturday at 3 o'clock. Make sure you join me. Have a fabulous week, and I'll leave you with the weather. Enjoy.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Dry over the next few days as high pressure builds in. We will see plenty of sunny spells by day but chilly at night, and then rain later moving in by the middle of the week. This area of high pressure anchored to the east of us, keeping weather fronts at bay generally over the next few days, but they will try and move in as we head towards Wednesday in particular, bringing some wetter and windier weather across the north and the west. Chilly evening out there. We've got clear skies across much of the UK, just some thicker cloud around northern and western areas. This will generally keep the frost at bay here, but elsewhere under the clear skies tonight we'll see temperatures falling close to, if not below freezing, -2 to -4 in the prone spots of northern England and southern Scotland. But that means plenty of blue skies to start the day on Monday morning. A chilly start, you might need to scrape the ice off the car, but that will soon melt away as the sun gets to work, and then through the day on Monday, a fine day to come. Plenty of sunny spells. Sunshine a bit more hazy though and limited across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, but temperatures doing quite well, 14 or 15 Celsius in the north and the west, but still chilly along some eastern coast with the breeze coming off the North Sea here. Temperatures falling away again Monday evening under those clear skies. The cloud just thickening across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland further as this weather system starts to move in, giving a few splashes of rain. But just notice the blues returning back on the map, indicating a frost returning to take us into Tuesday morning. That means, again, a sunny start across much of England and Wales. Cloudy skies across Northern Ireland, far west of Scotland, to begin Tuesday with some patchy rain and drizzle here. This continues through the day, but elsewhere, plenty of sunny spells. So again, the sunshine just turning hazy further east across parts of Scotland, northern England into the afternoon, and temperatures not too bad in that sunshine. That wetter weather moving in for Wednesday and Thursday, but temperatures overall a little above average.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's